Even sorrow can bloom again.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Tomioka Giyuu Got Cheated and Bonded with Kanae Kocho movie. Before we start, please go support Lgabo9778 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Giyuu is a male. They were both the happiest people in their lives, they had a good life, their grades at the academy were the best, and above all, they had a relationship. Giyu Tomioka, one of the best students at Kimetsu Academy, was happy because he had a girlfriend named Daki who didn't leave him alone during difficult times, such as when his beloved sister died in an accident. But everything fell apart when she cheated on him with. Kanae Kocho, one of the best students at the academy, was in a relationship with her boyfriend Tsunemi. She had a perfect life with him. They had 2 years left until graduation. But one event shattered everything. Her boyfriend cheated on her with. Both broken, they no longer believe much in feelings, having changed a lot, but together they will feel the same again. Chapter 1. I narrate. Two people woke up with empty eyes. If you were to look into their eyes, you would see that they had no emotion whatsoever. It seemed as if they didn't even have a soul. But why are they like this? Well, it's due to a betrayal they both suffered at the hands of the people they loved most. How did it happen? Well, it all started like this. 1 week before. The girl with long black hair that fell to her lower back was seen, her bangs were parted on 2 sides crossing her forehead, and she also had 2 long strands hanging from her temples. Her eyes were lilac, and her lips were painted red. She wore an academy uniform. This was Kanae Kocho, who was 17 years old and was accompanied by someone. That someone was his sister Shinobu Kocho. She had short hair that reached the top of her neck, tied with a butterfly clip, the tips of her hair were purple, her eyes were purple, she was 15 years old, and she wore an academy uniform. Both sisters walked to their academy, Kimetsu Academy, one of the best, where only the best in grades and studies are admitted. The money to enter was that of a normal academy. The only thing one had to do was see if one was good, and Kanae was the best in her class, and her sister Shinobu, who was 2 years younger than Kanae, was the best in her grade. But Kanae also got a boyfriend at that academy. His name was Tsunemi Shinazagawa. He was a troubled student, very temperamental, but his grades made him seem like a good student. His appearance made him look like a delinquent. His white hair, a scar on his face, and wide open eyes with an angry expression. Many would think that Kanae wouldn't be with him since she was kind and gentle with others and he was the complete opposite, treating others badly, but they were still in a relationship and it was all because Kanae had treated him well and not with fear like the others. That's why Tsunemi became interested in her, but what was coming was something that Kanae wouldn't expect. Tell Kana. I was on my way to the academy with my sister. I was happy to be going because I would see Tsunemi again. I don't understand why my family doesn't accept him. He's very protective of me, and even though I explained why he was like that, they didn't like him. I didn't understand them, but I didn't care. Although he's been acting a little strange lately, I suppose it's because of some problems he's having. Upon arriving, I said goodbye to Shinobu and wished her luck, hoping she had a good time since classes have been more difficult lately. But it wasn't a big problem for me. I'm very responsible with my duties and always pay attention in class. However, a classmate and childhood friend of mine was not far behind. His name is Giyu Tomioka. I met him with my sister when we were 5 years old and she was 3. At first, he was very shy, to the point of hardly speaking and being extremely nervous. But over time, he became more open with us, leaving his shyness aside. He is also extremely protective of the people he cares about. Although it may not seem like it, he fights well just to defend others without caring about himself. That's why he's a great friend, although his attitude changed because of an event. His sister had died giving birth to her niece, Kyojuro Rengoku's daughter. Giyu liked him because he had helped him many times and wasn't a coward, keeping the girl named Fuji. But I don't want to focus on that. He changed because of it. He was no longer lively, he was serious and not very social. But I don't want to focus on that now. I'm arriving very early to see Tsunemi, but I can't find him. Instead, I find Giyu, who has a lost look in his eyes. As far as I know, he has a girlfriend named Daki, very beautiful but not very good at her studies, since she was almost at the bottom of the class. But Giyu was helping her with that so she would do well. I go to him and greet him. Kanae? Hello Giyu, I say, smiling normally. Giyu? Hello Kanae-san, he said normally in an almost cold tone. He says the "san" out of respect, but it wasn't necessary, even though he couldn't do anything. Kanae? What are you doing all this? I asked, somewhat curious to know if he was alright. Giyu? I was just looking for Daki, I have to help him study a little, he said calmly. Kanae? Well, do you think you could help me look for Tsunemi? I asked curiously since I was getting tired of looking for him. Giyu? Well, I think I have time, he said normally as he walked with me looking for Tsunemi. We were chatting amicably on the way and he was showing a small smile. It's very nice to see his smile again, it's been a while since he smiled like that. He smiles a little with Daki, but not as much when we're talking like this. Suddenly we heard what sounded like a groan of pain. We went to the place and it was a room where the academy's cleaning supplies are kept. Nobody goes through here until lunchtime. The closer we got, the louder the moans became. I couldn't quite recognize the voice because it was accompanied by a man's moans, so we couldn't identify them. When we were in front of the door, we carefully opened it and what we saw broke my heart. In front of us, Daki and Tsunemi were having very wild hex, with Tsunemi thrusting into Daki while she moaned. I couldn't stand watching it. Tears were coming out, but I didn't make a sound. If I was like this, I didn't want to imagine how Giyuu was. That's why I turned to look at him, but nothing. He wasn't even crying, just had a cold, emotionless look. I couldn't stand seeing that anymore and wanted to leave, but Giyuu grabbed my shoulder and whispered in my ear. Giyuu. Kani, don't run away, face him. If you do, you'll make him suffer because he'll lose you, he said normally and coldly. I understood what he meant and my gaze was cold and empty. I no longer wanted to run away. If I did I would show my weakness to the one who betrayed me, and taking a deep breath I spoke. Kani. What a surprise, Shinazagawa and Daki, I said coldly as they stopped, staring at us, still joined by their private parts. Tsunemi. Oh, it's you, what do you want? He said disinterestedly. Kani. Well, it seems you never cared about me, but I'm just saying we're breaking up since I'm realizing you wanted my body, so goodbye, I said, turning around as I walked away, but I heard Giyuu say something to Daki. Giyuu. Goodbye Daki, I think I wasted my time trying to make you okay, he said as he left, leaving Daki crying over what happened. I'm surprised that he's so calm right now. I narrate. Kani and Giyuu walked silently to their classrooms without saying anything and processing the information. Chapter 2. Giyuu. I was walking to my academy to help my girlfriend named Daki, one of the people who supported me when my sister died. She was with me, as were my friends Kanae Kocho and Shinobu Kocho, the only ones who supported me along with my sister's husband. He was Kaijiro Rengoku, a very good person who was lively. I could tell he had no bad intentions towards my sister, so I let him be with her. But it devastated me when my sister died giving birth to my niece Fuji. But that's what my loved ones were there for. I didn't feel the same way anymore because I was afraid of losing someone else, but that trauma was overcome thanks to the others. I won't focus on that, I just arrived and I'm looking for Daki to help her study, since she's not very good at her studies, that's why I'm helping her, but I run into Kani who seemed to be looking for someone. She greeted me and asked for my help in finding Tsunemi. I agreed and we talked on the way. Talking to Eleni Daki was one of the few things that helped me smile, but then we heard a noise in the room where the cleaning supplies are kept. When we entered, we were shocked by what we saw. It was Tsunemi and Daki having hex like animals. I wanted to cry. The pain in my chest was very strong, but I calmed myself down as quickly as I could. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. They don't deserve my tears for scum like them. But I noticed Kani is looking at me crying. I didn't like seeing her like that, so I said a few words to her so that she would end things with him in a way that wouldn't show him any pain. I did the same and then left with Kani. I notice a curious look from her and decide to start a conversation to calm things down. Giyuu. What's wrong? You seem hesitant, I said calmly, but hurt inside. Kani. How can you be calm about that? You were deceived and you're acting like nothing happened, she asked me with a face that showed confusion and sadness. Giyuu. Just think about this, don't let them have the satisfaction of seeing your tears, he doesn't deserve them, save them for the pain that matters to you and that you want to release, don't waste them on scum like them, I said calmly, still walking towards my classroom since there wasn't much left. I notice she's thinking about it, but I notice her empty eyes. I don't want her to be in the same state as me, so noticing that we were far from the classroom and that nobody was around, I gave her a hug that I noticed surprised her. Giyuu. Don't have those empty eyes, I don't like seeing someone dear to me like that, I said calmly. Kani. It's easy to say, but doing it is difficult, this hurts a lot, she said, letting out a few tears. Giyuu. I know how it feels too, but don't worry, this is a phase. At first it hurts, then you don't care anymore, and in the end you laugh. That's how phases close, I said calmly as I pulled away, but I noticed that her eyes were regaining some of their characteristic sparkle. Kani. Thank you Giyuu, I can always count on you, she said, smiling a little, and I smiled too. After that, we went to the classroom, arriving just in time to start the class. I saw that some of you were having difficulty, and I don't blame you. We're in math class, and here it's very advanced that you have to use several formulas for a single math problem. Although it wasn't too difficult for me, what worried me was Kanae, and I started watching her discreetly and saw that she wasn't having any trouble either. I don't understand why I'm worried since she's one of the best, so it's normal. As classes are ending, we have to go to another class, but I noticed those bastards appear. Tsunemi has an arrogant smile, and Daki has difficulty walking while wearing a sad face, but I don't care and I just go with Kanae so that she doesn't feel bad because of him. Normal narration. Classes had ended and the two were going home while talking next to Shinobu, who noticed her sister's sadness. She wanted to ask, but Giyu touched her shoulder and gave her a look that told her not to say anything, and she understood. Everyone has already gone to their own homes, Giyu to his house where he lived with Kaijiro and Fuji, so that there wouldn't be any problems, but we won't focus on him, but on Kanae who, when she left with her sister, put on a sad smile. Shinobu, already fed up with that, wants to ask. Shinobu. "Nii-san, can you tell me why you're sad?" she said worriedly. "Kanae. You're my sister, but I don't want to talk about it," she said with empty eyes to Giyu's master since he helped her. She had a slight glimmer for Shinobu. "Shinobu. I understand, but tell me, and we won't talk about it again," she said doubtfully. "Kanae. Okay, what happened is that Tsunemi cheated on me, but not in the way that he just kissed someone, but he was having relations with Giyu's partner," she said, crying a little. Upon hearing that, Shinobu wanted to kill Tsunemi. She knew she couldn't trust him, and that confirmed it. But she became sad because Giyu was like a brother to her, since he always helped her, except when it came to dogs. In that case, Kanae always had to help by scaring them away. "Shinobu. I understand, I won't say anything more, but how did Giyu take it?" she said curiously. "Kanae. To be honest, he didn't show any expression, it seemed like he didn't care, then he said a few words to me, so I wouldn't be so hurt," she said normally, but without her knowing her cheeks had a small pink tint that was noticed by Shinobu. "Shinobu. I think I'll have a new brother-in-law, but what will happen between them after this?" she thought worriedly. That was during a week in which Giyu lost some of the sparkle in his eyes, and Kanae was the same. The betrayal of their exes did not leave them in peace. Chapter 3. Giyu was returning home after doing his homework. He stayed at the library to do his homework, but suddenly he received a call. It was Shinobu. He answered and heard her voice. "Giyu? What's wrong, Shinobu?" he said normally but dejectedly. "Shinobu. Giyu, do you think you can go after my sister?" Shinobu said, somewhat agitated. "Giyu? What's wrong, what happened to him?" he said worriedly. "Shinobu. He hasn't come home early for a week and I don't really know where he is," she said worriedly. "Giyu? I understand, but if you don't know where she is, where should I look for her?" he said doubtfully. "Shinobu. My parents know, I'm going to put you through to them since they didn't want to tell me where I was." After waiting a while, the cell phone rang and it was the voice of Kanae and Shinobu's father, who told Shinobu to leave so she wouldn't hear. "Senior. Kocho. Hola Giyu Daiho normal. Giyu. Hello, it's good to talk again," he said normally. "Mr. Kocho. Well, getting to the point, I know where Kanae is. She's at a bar as far as I know, and I don't want anything to happen to her since she's been coming home late," he said worriedly. "Giyu. I understand, which bar is she in?" "I'll go look for her," he said seriously, and Kanae's father gave him an address. Giyu walked. It was already night and dangerous, and that worried him since Kanae was one of the few people he cared about. As he arrived at the bar, he saw her. She was at a counter with her head down, blushing from the alcohol, and holding a small glass. He approached and sat next to her while ordering some wine. "Giyu. It's ironic that you were telling Shinobu and me not to drink so we'd be okay, and you were drinking," he said somewhat mockingly. "Kanae. It's ironic that you're a man and you're afraid of dogs when I had to scare them away, so you too wouldn't be afraid," she said, returning the attack. "Giyu. Jack made Kanae," he said to hold his wine glass in his hands, taking it. "Kanae. Why did you come?" she asked, already very drunk. "Giyu. They sent me to find you because it's late," he said normally. "Kanae. You can go, I'll be fine," she said sadly. "Giyu. We both know you're doing this to vent your frustrations," he said, taking a sip of his wine. "Kanae. It still hurts," she said, hurting as she remembered Tsunemi. "Giyu. Let's go outside and talk about it, there are still too many people," he said, finishing his wine and leaving with Kanae. But Kanae didn't last long because she was so drunk, so Giyu carried her on his back and she remained conscious. "Giyu. Okay, let's talk. You don't have to drink to stop the pain," he said worriedly. "Kanae. But it hurts," she said, crying on Giyu's shoulder. "Giyu. I know it hurts, I know that too, but you have to learn. That pain helps us know that we won't always be happy, but we have to know how to face it," he said wisely, and Kanae was somewhat happy. "Kanae. You always know what to say," she said, smiling. "Giyu. Well, yes, I always helped you when you were sad," he said, smiling. "Kanae. I would have liked to see you drunk, they say that if you're drunk you tell the truth, she said smiling. Giyuu. They say that, but well, maybe it'll happen someday, who knows, he said smiling as he continued walking to Kane's house. They talked on the way. Kane felt a warmth that she had felt with Tsunemi. No, that warmth was much greater than the one she had with Tsunemi, and she did not want to separate from him. Upon arriving at the house, Giyuu knocked on the door, and Kane's father opened it. He saw Giyuu with Kane on his back, but noticed that Kane's hands were clutching Giyuu's clothes, indicating that she didn't want to be separated. This brought a smile to Kane's father's face, because even though he wouldn't admit it, he would have liked Giyuu to stay with Kane. He had seen what she was like, and in his words, she would be the perfect boyfriend for his daughter, or even any girl. But he was jolted out of his thoughts when Giyuu turned around to give Kane the gift. He grabbed her and was going to pick her up, but Kane's hands wouldn't let go of him. Even in an effort to make him let go, he pulled her and Giyuu almost fell, but even so, she wouldn't let go. Mr. Kocho. Giyuu, do you think you can take Kane to her room? I don't think she wants to let go of you, he said, sounding tired. Giyuu. Okay, by the way, is it true that drunk people tell the truth? He said doubtfully. Mr. Kocho. Well, that's usually true, although many don't remember what they said, but who knows, why are you asking? He said doubtfully. Giyuu. It seems Kane wanted to see what it was like to be drunk, since she mentioned it while I was bringing her here, that's why I wanted to ask her, he said normally, and Kane's father was normal about it. Senior. Kocho. Well, take her to her room and don't do anything to her, he said protectively, and wanted to know how Giyuu would act. Giyuu. I'm a little offended, if I didn't do anything to her when she was completely drunk, does she think I'd do something to her in her own house? He said seriously, looking at the man who smiled. Mr. Kocho. Relax, I just wanted to know if you were that kind of person, and I noticed that Kane has good friends, he said with a smile. Giyuu took her to his room and was ready to leave her lying down so he could go, but she wouldn't move, even while asleep she didn't loosen her grip. He was a little nervous, but he thought of something. With one of his hands, he grabbed her hand and gently pulled it away while she gripped his hand with some force. After that, he left her on the bed and, as best he could, freed himself from her. Giyuu. You do get very attached to others, but anyway, good night Kane, he said as he left the room, noticing that Kane's father was there. Mr. Kocho. Tell me Giyuu, do you think my daughter will find someone good for her? He said sadly, as he didn't want her to suffer again. Giyuu. I don't know, don't misunderstand me, Alma is pretty, kind and gentle with others, and that attracts anyone, but the vast majority prefer someone for their physical appearance, so I doubt anyone would want to be with her for anything other than her body, he said seriously. Mr. Kocho. So you think she'll be left alone? He said somewhat angrily. Giyuu. I never said that, I'm her friend, and I won't leave her alone until she finds someone who makes her happy, he said seriously while looking around the room. Kane's father was happy. He certainly wanted Giyuu as his daughter's boyfriend, but he knew it would be very complicated since Giyuu doubted his feelings too much. Mr. Kocho. Hey Giyuu, it's getting late, and I don't think it's a good idea for you to leave at this hour, he said worriedly. Giyuu. Don't worry, I'll be fine, he said normally. Mr. Kocho. I'm worried too, how about you stay tonight in Kane's room on a futon I'll lend you? He said with some hope that they would both be together. Giyuu. I don't want to be a bother, he said somewhat nervously. Kane's father kept insisting until Giyuu agreed and stayed to sleep on the futon. The next day was going to be a holiday with no classes, so they were calm. Giyuu didn't have anyone waiting for him at home, since Kaijuro and his niece lived in another house, and he lived alone. Chapter 4. It was midnight and Kane was waking up and looking around her room, noticing Giyuu on a futon some distance away from her. Kane didn't understand what Giyuu was doing in her room, but she saw a note on a nightstand she picked it up and started to read. Note. Hello Kane, I'm your father. If you're wondering what Giyuu is doing in your room, it's because it was very late and I didn't want him to be in danger, so I lent him a futon. I hope it's not bad. End of note. Kane sighed a little. Her father was very kind to others, but it was nice to have Giyuu nearby. However, she remembered the warmth she felt when she was with him and she didn't feel it when she was far away. So she did something she wasn't sure was right or wrong, but she wanted to feel that warmth. She got up and without thinking lay down next to Giyuu. That warmth was returning, and according to her it felt too good, but that warmth increased when something sudden happened. Giyuu had turned around, and it seemed that he was giving Kane a hug. She blushed, but it didn't bother her, so she continued with the hug, and they fell asleep. The next morning, Kane and Shinobu's father went to the room to wake Kane and Giyuu, but when they entered, they didn't see Kane in her bed, but on the futon with Giyuu, her hugging him and him hugging her back. They were both shocked and didn't know what to do until Shinobu pulled her father out of the room and started talking. Shinobu. Dad, I think we'll leave them like this for a moment, she said playfully. Mr. Kocho. I think you're right, soon Kani will have Giyuu as her partner, he said happily. Then the two went downstairs and saw Kani and Shinobu's mother preparing breakfast, but she didn't see Kani and asked. Mrs. Kocho. Where is Kani? I can't see her, she said, looking around for Kani. Shinobu. He's sleeping with his maybe future partner, she said happily. Mrs. Kocho was stunned by what Shinobu said, but her father explained everything that happened to calm her down, and he succeeded. After a while, everyone finished breakfast and decided to go to Kani's room, where they stumbled upon a rather amusing scene. Kani was hugging a pillow. Giyuu was outside the futon on a wall, looking confused, until he saw the Kocho and became nervous. Giyuu? This isn't what it looks like, he said nervously. Mr. Kocho. So, according to you, what happened? He said, feigning seriousness. Giyuu? I was just sleeping on the futon she lent me, I woke up and Kani was there, he said, sounding a little scared. Shinobu. Don't worry, we believe you. Nissan was probably a little drunk and didn't know what she was doing, but tell me, did things escalate? She said mischievously, and Giyuu took a moment to understand and blushed. Giyuu? None of that happened, he said somewhat angrily. Mrs. Kocho. Well, you can leave, I need to talk to my daughter, she said kindly. Giyuu said he would go home so as not to be a bother anymore. Now the Kocho family looked at Kani, still asleep and hugging her pillow. Then Shinobu started to move her to wake her up. Kani? What happened? She said, somewhat confused. Shinobu. Nothing, Nissan, it's just that Dad and I saw you sleeping with Giyuu, she said mischievously. Kani didn't understand why they were saying that until she remembered what happened the night before, how she went to the futon to sleep with him, and she blushed so much that she couldn't speak, even steam was coming out of her ears. Mrs. Kocho. I told you I wanted grandchildren, but not so soon, she said mockingly, and Kani felt even worse. Mr. Kocho. But now, yes, because you slept with him, since I saw how he left you in bed when he brought you here, he said somewhat seriously. Kani. I don't know, it just felt good, she said, embarrassed. Shinobu. Nissan, could it be that you've liked Giyuu for a long time? She asked doubtfully, and her parents paid closer attention because if that was the case, they would accept it since they liked Giyuu. Kani was red-faced, unsure what to say, but decided to think things through. She and her sister had known him since childhood and grown fond of him, especially her, who in those days didn't understand why she liked being with him, until she understood. She liked Giyuu, and when she was with Sanemi, it seemed to be a way of forgetting those feelings she had for Giyuu. Kani? They planned not to tell you, she said nervously, but her family understood from her blush and left. While Sanemi was regretting what he didn't feel the same way about Daki as he did with Kani, which is why he was sad. He wanted to win her back to apologize and be with her again. And elsewhere was Daki crying. She remembered everything that happened with Giyuu and how she threw him away, now she wanted to be with him again. Chapter 5. It was a new day and Giyuu was walking. He didn't want to see Kani, not because he hated her, but because he felt embarrassed about what had happened the night before. When something like that happened, he was ashamed to talk about it. Today was a day off, and he wanted to be quiet and clear his mind, but unfortunately for him, he ran into Daki. He wanted to go somewhere else so she wouldn't notice him, but it was in vain. She noticed him and ran after him. Giyuu was also running, but not in Daki's direction, but in the opposite direction to get away from her. Although it didn't seem like it, he still hadn't completely gotten over it and needed time. After running a little while, he thought he had lost her, but she appeared behind him, not calling him, but he felt a hug from behind by Daki. Giyuu. Daki-san, please let me go, he said coldly. Daki. Please forgive me, she said crying, the two of them were in a somewhat quiet alley. Giyuu. You know what you did is unforgivable, and besides, I don't know if you know this, but I noticed you were cheating on me before. When you went out to parties, you'd kiss other people while you were drunk. I let it slide, but what happened in Shinazagawa was the last straw, so goodbye, he said, freeing himself and running away while Daki stood still, crying. Then he was walking again with a cold look while he had no direction. He walked normally while he was a little hungry. He decided to go to a place to have breakfast. He was fine in the morning, but what happened with Daki ruined the topic, so he would have to calm down. Once at the place, he met his friends Sabito and Mikomo who lived together and decided to approach them to talk, although he decided to listen. Sabito. Hey Mikomo, did you hear about Giyuu and Daki? He said, sounding a little sad. Mikomo. Yes, I heard it, do you think it's okay? She said sadly. Sabito. How do you think he feels about that? It seems a week has passed, he said, worried about him. Mikomo. I don't know, he'll probably be expressionless but deep down sad, she said dejectedly. Sabito. Well, you're right, I'm surprised he's not showing any pain. I'd like to support him, but I don't know how he feels, he said helplessly, but Mikomo grabbed his hand. Mikomo. "Don't worry, everything will be alright, he's strong, and he'll be able to pull through," she said, smiling at Sabito. Well, Giyu was leaving the place to go to another since he liked how they supported him, but he didn't want to talk to anyone, so he decided to go to another cafe where there were a lot of people. He barely found a table. As he sat down, he ordered a coffee with a slice of cake, although a certain person joined him, and it was someone he didn't want to talk to because of embarrassment. It was Kanae who came out. Kanae had entered the place intending to clear her head a bit, but it was full, and she had to go to a table where Giyu was. "Kanae?" "Hello Giyu," she said somewhat nervously. "Giyu?" "Hello Kanae-san," he said, his ears red because of the topic. "Kanae? Can I sit here?" she asked, feeling somewhat uncomfortable. "Giyu? I don't see the problem," he said, and Kanae sat down in the chair in front of Giyu and just looked at the menu while Giyu just waited looking at the table. No one said anything out of embarrassment, but Giyu decided to ask to break the awkward silence. "Giyu? And how is everything in your family?" he said, intending to start a conversation. "Kanae? Huh? Oh, everything's fine, my parents are working and Shinobu's grades are good, even though she can't find a partner," she said normally, and Giyu knew something. "Giyu? Shinobu doesn't have a partner because she doesn't want one or because she rejects everyone," he said normally, while Kanae looked at him confused. "Kanae? What do you mean?" she said, intrigued. "Giyu? Several times when I had to go to the library I saw how several people confessed their feelings to her and she rejected them, either she likes someone else or she simply doesn't want a partner," he said something funny and achieved his goal. "Kanae? Hahaha, you're right and I wanted to apologize," she said, sounding a little nervous. "Giyu?" "Because," he said normally. "Kanae? Because of what happened last night," she said, embarrassed. "Giyu? Relax, you were under the influence of alcohol, it's normal that you don't know what you're doing," he said normally, and luckily nobody heard them. "Kanae? I'm glad you know what to do in these situations," she said normally while smiling. Then they both received their meals since Kanae had also ordered. They ate normally while talking amicably, although they felt a kind of warmth they had never felt with their previous partners. Chapter 6. Note: Giyushino will be present, but the main ship will be Gyukana. End of note. A month had passed, during which Tsunemi and Daki had been trying to get back with their former partners, but nothing worked. They were simply ignored. Furthermore, each of them helped each other avoid them, and their relationship was improving. Now they were in class waiting for it to end because they were bored. Whenever they could, they studied to avoid problems in class and practically knew everything the teacher said, but they had Tsunemi and Daki staring at them. As classes were ending, they both went outside to find some peace and quiet, but their path was stopped by their teacher, Yuzui Tenjin. He was like a friend to them, and he was also known for organizing parties with students from his class because of their almost upcoming graduation. "Yuzui? Oh, but look who we have here, if it isn't my 2-star students," he said with a smile. "Kanae? Hello Yuzui-sensei," she said with a smile. "Giyu? Good afternoon Yuzui-sensei," he said with a small smile. "Yuzui? My students are well behaved, but I've come to tell you that I invite you to the student party that will be organized at my house," he said smiling. "Giyu? Don't you think that's a bit of an overreaction?" he asked, somewhat uncertain. "Yuzui? Don't worry, both teachers and students will come, besides, it's good to take a break from studying once in a while," he said smiling. "Kanae? I'm going, I think a break from studying won't hurt me," she said very calmly, and Giyu just nodded because he thought it would be a good thing. Then the two of them were about to leave again. As they walked they talked about what to do since the party would be at night at 7, but their path was interrupted again by the people they didn't want to see. "Tsunemi? Hey Kanae, don't you want to go out?" he said with a small smile. "Daki? Hello Giyu-kun, you can come with me," she said, smiling as well, while the two of them were uncomfortable with each other's presence. "Kanae? I'm sorry but no, I'm busy," she said coldly as she grabbed Giyu to leave. This act caused Daki and Tsunemi to become jealous because they didn't know why they were so close. They wanted them back so they could be happy like before. And now Giyu and Kanae were walking home together since they could accompany each other to a certain point. On the way, they spoke somewhat sadly. They didn't understand why it still hurt them when they spoke to each other. It just hurt, but little by little that pain went away and was replaced by the warmth they both had for each other. But now we focus on Kanae, who had to separate from Giyu since her house was in another direction. On the way, she thought about what might happen at the party, but one detail escaped her, and it was the fact that Yuzui always invited many people, and that included Tsunemi and Daki. She, already somewhat fed up with having to see them, began to think about whether to go or not and came to the conclusion to go to her parents and ask them. When she arrived home, she went inside and saw her family eating with Shinobu and talking about some things, and when they heard her come in, they turned to look at her. "Shinobu? Ni-san, what happened?" You took longer than usual, Shinobu said, smiling. Annie? Oh, I was just talking to Giyu, she said normally. Mr. Kocho? You've been spending a lot of time with Giyu lately, he said smiling while Kanny didn't understand, but her mother spoke. Mrs. Kocho? Could it be that you're having a relationship with him and you don't want to tell us? She said, smiling mischievously, but it hurt Shinobu to hear about Giyu and Kanny's relationship. Annie? Huh. Nuo, we were just talking as friends, she said, very red, but it hurt her to call Giyu a friend. Mr. Kocho? Yes, of course, a friend, but what happened? You seem a little nervous. Annie? It's about a topic I don't know whether to accept or not, she said with a sigh. Mrs. Kocho? And what is it about, my child? She said, smiling at Kanny. Annie? Yuzui-sensei invited the whole class to a party at his house, including Giyu, but the problem is that Shinazagawa and Daki will be there, she said angrily while her parents thought. Mr. Kocho? Well, I say you should go. I know you won't like it because of him, but think of this as an opportunity to take a break from studying. Besides, Giyu will be there, and you can all support each other against the two of them, said the father, smiling, knowing his daughter needed a break. Annie? What do you think, Ka-san and Shinobu? She said, looking at them somewhat curiously. Mrs. Kocho? I say that, just like your father, you need to stay calm about studying, Kanny-chan, she said, smiling at her. Shinobu? I support our parents, Ni-san. Go and have some fun with Giyu, she said, smiling at her as Kanny went to her room to get ready. Meanwhile, Giyu was at home thinking the same thing about Kanny. He had no one to ask since everyone was busy, so he would just go about his business as usual, since he had nothing to do. What they didn't know is that at that party their relationship was possibly more advanced. Chapter 7. Annie was getting ready to go to her sensei's party, but she wasn't the only one. Some others were also going, including those in her class and Giyu. But the ones she didn't want to see were Sanemi and Daki. Sanemi's reasons for hating her were well known, but Daki's dislike stemmed from his behavior. Even after what he did to Sanemi, he had the nerve to cry, pretending he didn't want to go, when it was clear he was enjoying the moment. But returning to the present, Kanny had already finished preparing to go to her sensei's house, or rather, as she considered it, like everyone else, his mansion, since it was too big for one person, something that was only justified by the fact that her sensei had 3 wives. This is her outfit. She had finished enlisting, but now we will focus on Giyu, who was enlisting normally. He knew he would meet Daki at the party since Yuzui invited many people, but he had to face it. He couldn't run away from the past forever, he had to face everything and forget. He was already ready and was going to the party, but he would also stop by to pick up Kanny, since he knew they would meet. This is what he was wearing, but he only wore it because it was late and cold, but in reality this was his true appearance. Ignore the backpack. He was walking and not paying much attention to his surroundings, so he didn't notice that he bumped into Kanny as he walked past her, which surprised her and made her somewhat angry. She gave him a light tap on the back of the neck, causing him to grab the back of his neck and turn around to look at Kanny. Giyu? Kanny? What happened? Why the blow? He said somewhat angrily, rubbing his head. Annie? What do you mean, why? You walked right past me without even saying hello, she said, pouting, and Giyu didn't know when he crossed paths with her and noticed her outfit. Giyu? I'm sorry, I was distracted, forgive me, he said, somewhat embarrassed by what happened. Annie? It doesn't matter anymore, let's go, we're almost there, she said smiling, but she noticed Giyu's clothes by the way. You look good, she said without hesitation, then blushed, just like Giyu. Giyu? You too, he said, turning away, and Kanny turned even redder. The two walked in a somewhat awkward silence, but a breeze came towards them. Giyu wasn't affected. In fact, he didn't understand why he had brought something to keep warm if he was used to the cold. But Kanny was different. She began to shiver from the cold, which Giyu noticed, and he decided to help her by taking off his jacket and putting it on Kanny, who was surprised by her friend's gesture. Annie? Hey Giyu, why are you giving me your jacket? She said normally as a pink tint appeared on her cheeks. Giyu? I'm more used to the cold, but you're not, so it's best if you have this so you don't get cold while we go to sensei's house, he said normally as he walked and Kaner followed him. As soon as they arrived, they saw something that made a bead of sweat rise on the back of their necks. Many colorful lights were emanating from the house, along with a sign that read, "Welcome to the most extravagant party." This was already normal for them, but their sensei outdid himself a little more. The two entered the party and saw their sensei talking to his 3 wives. Kanny didn't like the idea of Yuzui having many women, since in her opinion he was a womanizer. Giyu didn't care. It was his life and he had no right to tell him what to do. The two of them entered and sat on one of the sofas in the living room, while many were celebrating, drinking, or dancing with their partners, while the two of them were talking quietly, but then the people they hated so much appeared. Sanemi. "Hello Kani-chan," he said, somewhat happy and angry at seeing Giyu near her. "Kani? What do you want, Shinazagawa?" she said somewhat angrily while Giyu looked coldly at Tsunemi and Daki. "Tsunemi? I can't come see my girlfriend," he said, smiling. "Kani? I said it and I'll say it again, we're over, so leave me alone," she said, trying to calm down. "Tsunemi? Come on, come with me, we're going to have some fun," he said mischievously, approaching Kani, but he was stopped by Giyu who put an arm in front of him. "Giyu? She said she wants peace, so leave her alone," he said coldly while Daki. "Tsunemi? Don't get in the way, you bastard," he said, trying to hit him, but his fist was stopped by him. Giyu doesn't like to fight, but when necessary, he does. The two were about to start a fight, but Yuzui stopped them, arriving just in time and pointing them out, throwing Tsunemi out of his house, as well as Daki, who, although he didn't cause anything, didn't interrupt. He didn't throw Giyu out since he was only protecting Kani. After that, the two went to a bar in the house to order some sake to unwind. While they were drinking, they told jokes and talked about anecdotes from some trips or funny problems they had, but Kani remembered something that Daki had done that bothered her at the time. Flashback. Kani was walking through the halls of her academy, but was caught by Daki in a classroom that was empty. "Kani? What the hell?" she said, surprised. "Daki? Damn it, why are you so close to Giyu?" she said angrily. "Kani? And what's it to you, he's my friend anyway," she said, but it hurt to call him friend, she had already made it clear that she liked Giyu. "Daki? I don't care, when he comes back to me I'll make him completely mine, I bet I'll please him more on his first time than you did," she whispered in his ear before leaving. Kani got angry at that moment, how could Daki put that as something she was better at, that wasn't a game, but she had doubts if Giyu preferred Daki over her. End of flashback. Upon remembering this, Kani couldn't help but recall that question she had, and without thinking, and being honest because of the alcohol, she asked. "Kani? Giyu, I have a question," she said, red-faced from the alcohol, as she had exceeded her limit. "Giyu? I think you should tell me that outside, since there are a lot of people listening after the almost fight," he said, very red from the alcohol, and he was going to be very sincere. The two, having their last drink, left the house under the watchful eye of Yuzui, who was curious and went to see them. He saw them walk to the courtyard. No one could see them there except him. "Giyu? And what did you want to ask Kani?" he said smiling. "Kani? Would you prefer Daki or me in a choice for a partner?" she said somewhat embarrassed, and Giyu was somewhat surprised, but he was going to be honest. "Giyu? If I had to choose between Daki and you, I'd choose you. You're very kind, you supported me a lot when I was down, that's why I'd choose you, I even think I fell in love with you," he said the last part in a whisper that, unfortunately for him, Kani heard and blushed. "Kani? So you fell in love with me, huh?" she said smiling, and Giyu had a somewhat frightened expression. "Giyu? Yes, but I don't think you'll accept me," he said, sounding somewhat sad under the influence of alcohol. "Kani? Hahaha, you're still a bit of a negative in the answer, but if I'm being honest, I fell in love with you too," she said, turning to look at him as he raised his head and met her gaze. The two looked into each other's eyes and, due to the effect of the alcohol, were getting closer. Their breaths were very close to another, and they ended up kissing, closing their eyes and enjoying the moment they had in the courtyard, the moon illuminating them both, and Yuzui was more than surprised. Yuzui? What an extravagant declaration, he thought happily for his two students whom he considered the closest thing to brothers, but what he saw surprised him. They were taking things further, as at one point they separated and kissed again, this time with tongues, deepening things. Their hands were getting quite high, with Kani putting her hands under Giyu's shirt, feeling his skin, and him placing them behind her waist. Yuzui, more than surprised, decided to interrupt. "Yuzui? What's going on here?" he said, appearing and surprising the two, who were shocked and separated. After that moment, Yuzui told them that if they wanted to continue, it could be at his house or a hotel, which made them both blush, since they managed to be somewhat conscious and realized that they had confessed, so the two of them decided to go to their homes. On the way they didn't want to talk even though they were under the influence of alcohol, but something else happened, and that is that Kani's parents sent Shinobu to watch over Kani in case something happened, and she sent audio messages to her parents about what was happening, and they were surprised. Chapter 8. Shinobu was sad. Although she didn't show it, she loved Giyu. She was walking home, planning to talk to her parents about it so they could help her. She had already sent them the audio recording she'd made of Giyu and Kani and was just walking sadly. But now we focus on Kani and Giyu, who were somewhat sober, though a little drunk. They decided to go home since they knew they could cause trouble, so they ended up heading home. They walked with difficulty along the way as they weren't fully conscious, but Giyu was more aware and remembered his and Kani's words, which made him blush a little. He was unsure of what they were now. He didn't know. Were they still friends, or were they a couple? It was a mental struggle. But he saw that she was about to fall and quickly caught her, putting her on his back to carry her to his house, and then he left. But Kanae, who was now somewhat conscious, spoke. Kanae? Hey Giyu, what are we after what we talked about? She said blushing. Giyu? I don't know, are we friends or a couple after that? He said, still walking. Kanae? I don't think it would make sense to be friends, I think it would be more logical to be a couple, she said blushing while hiding her face behind her back. Giyu? That's strange, they usually happen in different situations as far as I know, and we were drunk and about to do that, and on top of that, in the courtyard of Sensei's house, he said laughing a little, and Kanae laughed a little too. Kanae? And that you agree to be my partner, Giyu-kun, he said smiling. Giyu? I was going to ask you in a nicer way, but okay, I want to be your boyfriend if you agree to be my girlfriend, he said smiling, still walking with Kanae on his back, who, as best she could, approached Giyu's face and kissed him on the lips. He accepted, and for him, that was more than enough to know what she meant. Then they started going to Kanae's house so she could rest. She would never forget that, but they didn't realize they had arrived at the house. Giyu had taken Kanae off his back, then knocked on the door and it opened. He then let Kanae go about her business as usual, and then walked home himself, but we won't focus on Giyu, since he easily arrived home. We see Kanae walking with some difficulty, but the lights turned on, and she saw her parents and Shinobu looking at her. In the case of her parents, they looked at her somewhat seriously but mischievously, and Shinobu was somewhat sad but happy at the same time. Mr. Kocho? And how is it that you confessed? He said seriously and mischievously. Kanae? Huh? She said, very red. This is Kocho. And they almost did, she said mischievously as she imagined herself with her grandchildren. Kanae wasn't going to put up with that, but luckily for her, Shinobu spoke up to calm things down. Shinobu? Mom, Dad, calm down, Nii-san is a little drunk and will need to rest because of what happened, besides, tomorrow will be a day off for her to rest, she said normally while looking at her sister, smiling somewhat sadly, which Kanae noticed, but she needed to rest. After that, she went to her room to sleep, although in her mind she was screaming like never before. Now she was in a relationship with Giyu and didn't know how she should be with him or even remember that they confessed because of the alcohol issue, but she was going to talk to him tomorrow since she was going to be free as well as him. But now we focus on Shinobu, who was in her room shedding some tears. She also loved Giyu, but she didn't want her sister to be upset about it, so she was letting it all out while crying. She would ask her parents for advice on what to do since it was a complicated issue. The next day. Kanae woke up with a rather strong headache, but she didn't pay it any mind. She remembered what happened the night before and couldn't help but blush deeply, even more so when she and Giyu were about to have sex in the courtyard. That really embarrassed her, but she calmed down so she could go down to the dining room and have breakfast with her parents. When she arrived, everyone looked at her, intrigued by what had happened yesterday. Mr. Kocho. Hello daughter, how did you sleep? He said with a smile. Kanae? Well, my head just hurts a little, but everything's normal, she said calmly. This is Kocho. So, will you tell us about your new relationship? She said, smiling at her daughter, who blushed. Kanae? Well, I don't know if it's confirmed, she said, blushing but somewhat sad. Shinobu? It's not confirmed yet, she said, sounding somewhat hopeful. Kanae? We were both drunk, so I don't know if Giyu remembers what happened, she said sadly. The others thought so, and they were right, since there are people who don't remember what happened, but Mr. Kocho was somewhat angry, so without wasting any time he took out his cell phone and called Giyu and put it on speakerphone. Everyone was listening to what was going to happen and Giyu answered. Phone. Giyu, hello Mr. Kocho, he said calmly. Mr. Kocho. Hello Giyu, I have a question. Can you tell me what happened the night my daughter went to the party with you? He said while he was serious and the others listened. Giyu. Well, tell me, this is on speakerphone, he said, somewhat scared. Mr. Kocho. Don't worry, nobody can hear you, he said, lying because he wanted to know. Giyu. Well, what happened at the party was this. We arrived at Yuzui-sensei's house and went inside. Then Shinazagawa appeared, trying to take Kanae away. I tried to defend her, but Yuzui-sensei arrived and took him away. After that, I don't remember much, he said, somewhat nervously. Mr. Kocho. Just tell me what else happened, he said seriously. Giyu. Please don't be angry, he said, sounding a little scared. Mr. Kocho. Fine, I'll try, he said more seriously, making Giyu even more nervous. Giyu. Well, the next thing is that I started drinking just like Kanae while we were talking. I kept telling her that I liked Kanae-san, and after we were drunk, I confessed to her. I don't remember much more, but I think Kanae will forget. If you want, I'll stay away from her, he said seriously. Everyone was surprised. Kanae's parents smiled at how good Giyu was at not getting anyone into trouble, and they were happy. Mr. Kocho. Well, that's fine, you don't need to stay away from my daughter, I'm just letting you know that we might be family, he said, hanging up the call, and everyone saw Kanae, who was red-faced. Chapter 9. Giyu was confused. He had received a call from Mr. Kocho, who asked what happened at the party. Without hesitation, but nervously, he told him everything he remembered. He thought Mr. Kocho was going to ask him to stay away from Kanae, but it was the opposite, as he replied that they might be family. He didn't know what was happening and was so confused that he sat with a lost look on the sofa of his apartment. Meanwhile, at the Kocho house, Kanae was smiling a lot while she had a blush on her face, but there was someone who wasn't well, it was Shinobu. Although it sounds strange, Shinobu was happy that Kanae had Giyu as a boyfriend, but at the same time she felt sadness and anger. She loved Giyu and wanted him for herself, but what could she do if he was with her sister? Sadness won out and she shed a few tears that her family didn't notice, and she ran to her room, which caused Kanae and her parents to look at her somewhat confused. Mr. Kocho. What's wrong with Shinobu? He said, sounding worried. This is Kocho. There must be something important I need to do, she said normally while inwardly worried about Shinobu. Kanae. That must be it, she said while thinking about calling Giyu so they could talk and officially become boyfriend and girlfriend, although she was equally worried about Shinobu. Meanwhile, Shinobu entered her room on the second floor of her house and slammed the door shut before lying face down on her bed. The pain in her chest finally came out, along with countless tears. She had kept the fact that she loved him for so long. When he was single and lost his sister, she was there for him, trying to comfort him and show him he wasn't alone. But then Daki came along and ruined her life by revealing that she and Giyu were in a relationship. That was one of the breaking points in the wall that contained Shinobu's sadness. When she heard that Daki had cheated on Giyu again, she regained hope of being with him. But Giyu distanced himself somewhat and Kanae was the only one who spoke to him. She was afraid that Kanae was with Giyu and that fear became reality and the wall crumbled. All the pain from her feelings for Giyu was being released and she couldn't take it anymore. She wanted to leave the house and even though she knew he wouldn't reciprocate her feelings, she wanted to at least tell him how she felt so she could feel better about herself. She was crying her eyes out, her pillow had a wet stain bigger than her head, but getting back to Kanae, she wanted to call Giyu to go out and be an official couple, so she grabbed her cell phone to arrange to meet him at the park a few blocks from her house, and Giyu answered the call. On the call. Giyu. Hello. He said, getting to the point of finding out what was happening. Kanae. Hello, Giyu said kindly. Giyu. Hello Kanae, he said nervously since he didn't know how to talk to her after what happened. Kanae. I wanted to ask if we could meet at the park, I want to talk about something, she said normally, but if Giyu were watching her on a video call, he would see how red she was. Giyu. Sure, no problem, he said, hanging up the call. After that, the two of them got ready in their respective homes, wearing the same clothes they had worn to the party, since they weren't dirty and because they were also normal to wear outside. But Shinobu, who had gone out for a while, heard them and went back to her room to cry. She didn't know what to do anymore, so she would just try to calm down locked in her room. After a while, Giyu and Kanae were already in the park. They met and greeted each other, then sat down on one of the park benches, and silence reigned there. The people who saw them thought they were a couple who had argued and whispered. Woman 1. Look, I'm sure the boy tricked her, she whispered. Woman 2. I don't think so, maybe they'll talk, they'd make a good couple, she said in a whisper before leaving. Giyu and Kanae were blushing until Giyu decided to break the silence so as not to make the atmosphere awkward. Giyu. So, what did you want to talk about? He said, wanting to get to the point. Kanae. Well, do you remember what happened last night? She said, very red. Giyu. Do you remember what happened? He said nervously. Kanae. Well, I remember confessing to you, how I kissed you, and things were getting more serious, she said, red-faced but amused, making Giyu blush. Giyu. I see, and what do you think, he said brightly. Kanae. Well, you know we ended up saying we'd be boyfriend and girlfriend, but we were under the influence of alcohol. I want to know if you really love me, she said, blushing, waiting for Giyu's honest answer. Giyu. Sigh. Well, if that's what you want, the truth is, yes, I always loved you, I just didn't have the courage to tell you things because I didn't want to ruin our friendship. I went out with Daki because he helped me and also because I wanted to forget those feelings so we could be okay, he said as some tears came out of his eyes. Kanae was surprised by what he said and was also shedding some tears since Giyu didn't want to separate from her to be okay, so without warning he kissed her on the lips, surprising Giyu. He didn't know what to do but simply accepted the kiss Kanae gave him since he loved her too. While some gossipy people watched with tenderness, the children who were there had an expression of disgust since they found kisses disgusting. After a while they separated, blushing deeply. Kanae. I love you too, Giyu, but I want us to make it official that we're boyfriend and girlfriend, not some ugly thing when we're drunk. I want it to be when we're both sober. Giyu? Well then, Kanae Kocho, would you do me the honor of being your partner with whom to spend my life? He said with a smile. Kanae? Of course Giyu Tomioka, she said to hug him, being very happy at that moment. Chapter 10. After the two confessed their feelings, their relationship was more than confirmed and they were both very happy. They felt a great warmth towards each other and they were sure to be fine. However, that wasn't the case. Right now, they had to go home, or rather, Giyu had to accompany Kanae home. It was getting late and he didn't want her to go alone. Along the way they talked about trivial things. They didn't need to know each other's tastes since they had known each other since childhood, or so they thought, since they themselves didn't know that they had other tastes that they wouldn't reveal, they would only be revealed as they progressed. Upon arriving at the house, Giyu left her at the door, but Kanae grabbed her arm. She wanted her to stay for two reasons. To sleep with him and also because they had spent so much time outside that it was already late. Giyu? What's wrong, Kanae? He said normally, noticing that she had a deep blush. Kanae? CC, can you s? Giyu was just as red-faced. He knew it was late, but he didn't want to inconvenience Kanae by having to sleep at her house, so he quickly refused. Giyu? And no need for me to stay, I can leave normally, he said somewhat nervously. He was sure Kanae would agree with him, but he swallowed hard when he noticed a cold look from Kanae. He knew that Kanae's kindness came naturally, but her angry demeanor was something new he had seen. He would even say that he was facing a Shinigami who was going to sentence his death. Kanae? Giyu Tomioka, you're going to stay here to sleep, got it? She said, looking at him. Giyu was sweating profusely, and as soon as Kanae finished speaking, he nodded fearfully. Then, seeing her smile again, he felt a drop of sweat trickle down his face because of the bipolarity Kanae had shown. But this was seen by Kanae and Shinobu's parents. Mr. Kocho couldn't help but remember that the same thing had happened with his wife, and he only thought of one thing. Mr. Kocho? I wish you luck, Giyu, women are scarier even if it doesn't seem like it, he thought while smiling at them. Mrs. Kocho watched proudly. She was pleased to see that Kanae seemed to be wearing the pants in the relationship. But Shinobu kept her head down, wanting to cry, but her parents were there too, and she couldn't. She could only watch helplessly. But Mrs. Kocho knew that Shinobu was unwell. She never said it, but she knew her daughter had feelings for Giyu, but there was nothing to be done. Giyu was with Kanae, and she couldn't break up with her so he could be with Shinobu. The thought crossed her mind that he could be with both of them, but that would cause problems, and her husband probably wouldn't accept it. Returning to what was happening, Kanae had entered the house and asked her parents if Giyu could sleep with her in her room, although she said it with embarrassment. Her parents told her there was no problem, Shinobu didn't say anything, and just went to her room at a normal pace, but a joke from her mother made her want to cry. Mrs. Kocho. It's fine if you sleep together, just don't make noise and don't break the bed, she said laughing, causing Kanae and Giyu to blush deeply, already bright red. That's why Shinobu went to her room faster and locked herself in, then grabbed her pillow and started to cry. Note. I know I'm putting Shinobu through a lot of suffering, but it's necessary. After that, Kanae and Giyu went to the room to sleep. Giyu remembered that Kanae's father told him that he could use a futon that Kanae had in her room for visits from her friends. Giyu? Kanae, your father told me you had a futon you could lend me to sleep on, where is it? He said doubtfully. Kanae? And no, you won't sleep on the futon, she said, blushing slightly. Giyu? So where will I sleep? He said, confused. Kanae? You'll sleep with me in my bed, she said, red-faced, and Giyu was the same. BFK, are you sure about that? She said, trying to reason with Kanae. Again he felt fear when Kanae's cold gaze was on him, and he swallowed again because of the fear that gaze gave him. He felt that she was looking into his soul. Kanae? Giyu Tomioka, you're going to sleep with me, period, she said, grabbing his arm, pulling him down, and throwing him onto the bed so she could be with him and cover herself with the blankets. Both young people had their backs to each other. Kanae was nervous, sometimes she acted impulsively, and this was one of those situations where she already regretted doing that, she was still turned away, both of them still had their backs to each other, and Giyu decided to ask. Giyu? Tell me if you feel uncomfortable so I can get a futon, he said normally, or rather, trying to be as calm as possible. Kanae? It's not uncomfortable, it's just that it's the first time I've slept in the same bed with someone, she said, blushing. Giyu? It's understandable, some are used to sleeping alone and are used to sharing, I'm going to go out and find a futon, so as not to bother you, he said to try to get her to sleep, but he felt arms grab him or rather hug him. Kanae? Don't go please, it feels good, she said, hiding her face and hugging Giyu, who turned around and hugged her back, feeling warm. Giyu? Because you want me to sleep with you, he asked the question. Kanae? The day you came to take me home when I was drunk, I felt warmth being with you. It felt good that in the middle of the night I woke up and went to your futon to sleep with you, that's why, she said, hiding her face. Giyuu. I see, that explains what happened that morning, he said, remembering what had happened. Annie. Besides, I'm scared, I don't want the same thing to happen to me as happened to Shinazagawa, she said, letting out some tears that were dried by Giyuu's finger, and she looked at him. Giyuu. Never think that I'm going to leave you for someone else, I only have one person in my heart, and that would be you, Kani, he said, smiling, and Kani blushed at that. The two approached each other and shared a short kiss before falling asleep in each other's arms, ready for the next day. Chapter 11. The month had passed since Kani and Giyuu started dating, and they had to say they really enjoyed each other's company. Giyuu was affectionate and understanding with Kani. When they talked, she felt good. Kani was very kind, but somewhat jealous, something Giyuu liked, even though it sounds strange, since he was the only one who showed that side of himself. But what about Shinobu? Well, she fell into something like a depression. She wanted Giyuu, she wanted him for herself, for him to comfort her when she was feeling down, she wanted to spend her days with him, but she couldn't anymore. She lost her chance to be with him, but today, at least, she was going to tell him how she felt. But Kani noticed that too. She knew her sister had developed feelings for Giyuu, but she didn't know what to do. She loved Giyuu and wasn't going to end things just to make her happy. She had to think of something to make her happy. After a while, Kani and Giyuu arrived at Kani's house because Kani had to look for some things. Once inside, Kani went to her room to look for them, and Giyuu was going to accompany her, but she closed the door since she needed to look alone. Giyuu stayed waiting, but he heard something. Shinobu. Snip snip, why, she said, crying a little silently. Upon hearing her, Giyuu went to her room and entered carefully so as not to scare her, but she heard him and quickly acted as if nothing had happened, with a fake smile. Shinobu. Ara, hello Giyuu-san, she said, smiling falsely. Giyuu. What's wrong? He said, getting straight to the point. Shinobu. Huh. I don't know what you mean, Giyuu-san, I'm fine, she said, somewhat nervously. Giyuu, seeing that she wouldn't say anything, gave her a hug. Shinobu blushed because of it. She felt good about it and returned the hug, and the next words made her burst into tears. Giyuu. Let go of the pain, you will always have my shoulder and your sisters to let go of your pain, and also your parents, he said, stroking her head, and she couldn't help it. Shinobu let out a heart-wrenching scream into Giyuu's shoulder and began to cry uncontrollably, unable to bear her pain any longer. Luckily, her parents weren't there, but Kani heard her and came out to stand at Shinobu's door, listening to what was happening. Giyuu. Are you calmer now? He said, seeing that she was crying less. Shinobu. Why yes, she said, wiping away her tears. Giyuu. Well, tell me why you were crying, he said calmly, looking at her. Shinobu. She didn't say anything, she was nervous, what should she say to him, should she tell him how she feels or should she lie to him? Her heart was racing and a blush was spreading across her face. Giyuu was looking at her with those blue eyes like the sea. Shinobu loved those eyes. She saw their sparkle and wanted to look at them longer. But her gaze fell down to his lips, those lips she so longed to taste. They looked so good to her, but she held back from throwing herself at him and kissing him. Shinobu. She was more nervous, she wanted to speak, but the words were like a knot in her throat that prevented her from speaking. As Kani listened and understood what was happening and knew what Shinobu was trying to say, tears streamed from her eyes. She was afraid that Giyuu would leave her for Shinobu. She wanted to intervene, but she couldn't stop her little sister from hiding her feelings any longer. What should she do? While Giyuu was confused, he saw her blushing face. He had to admit that she looked beautiful with that red tone on her face, but he had to respect that he was with Kani, and he tried to see what was wrong. He noticed her nervousness as she tried to speak, and he decided to speak to calm her down. Giyuu. If you're not ready to talk, take your time, calm down, and call someone you trust to tell them what's wrong, he said, giving her another hug. She got up from the bed where she had been sitting next to Shinobu to go out and see if Kani had already left, but her sleeve was held by Shinobu's hand, who was looking at the ground. She was already decided. She was going to tell Giyuu how she felt, and if he rejected her, at least she would have the satisfaction of getting rid of the feelings she had been hiding and at least freeing herself. Shinobu. Giyuu, I know what I'm about to say is wrong, but I can't stay silent anymore, she said, seeing that he was confused. Giyuu. What's wrong, Shinobu? He said, seeing how she no longer held his sleeve and recovered herself in a confident and self-assured manner. Shinobu. I want to thank you, she said, noticing how confused Giyuu was. I thank you for always being by my side, thank you for all the times you helped me when we were little, thank you for not being like the others and always supporting me, just like me-san, she said, looking at him as tears streamed down her face. Giyuu. Shinobu, remember that since we were little you're one of the few people who matter to me, there's no need to thank me, loved ones are always there to support each other he said, giving her a sincere smile, making Shinobu blush. Shinobu. Even if you say I don't have to, I'll always be grateful because she paused for a moment to catch her breath. Annie, who was outside, continued listening as tears streamed from her eyes. She wanted to interrupt the moment, but she was her sister. She couldn't simply ruin Shinobu's moment like she had experienced herself. But the pain in her chest intensified. Giyu. Because Shinobu he said, somewhat confused. Shinobu. Poor Giyu Tomioka yo. I love you. Those were the words Giyu heard and that came out of Shinobu's mouth, who looked at Giyu with a blush because of what he said. He didn't know what to do. He was with Kanae, but he also didn't want to hurt Shinobu. What should he do? He was nervous, seeing Shinobu who had tears in her eyes. Shinobu. I know you're with Kanae Nisan, and I respect that, I just want to tell you how I feel because it hurts to see you with her and not have told you how I feel. I don't want you to be my lover, I don't want to hurt Nisan, so it's best if we don't talk she said sadly, lowering her head and letting out tears. Giyu. Shinobu and I didn't finish because Kanae ran in and gave Shinobu a big hug, surprising everyone present. Kanae. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for you to feel bad about my relationship with Giyu, I just wanted to fill the void I had by being with him since I love him, but it was never my intention to hurt you she said, hugging Shinobu tightly, who again released her pain. Giyu looked at that sadly, feeling that they were already suffering because of him, but he decided to speak to calm things down, but Kanae said something that would make Giyu not speak. Kanae. Let's talk about this first, I don't want to see you suffer, Giyu-kun, you can leave for today please, I just need to talk to my sister she said sadly. Giyu simply nodded and left the room with a somewhat frightened expression and a mental complex. He would just have to see how things went. Chapter 12. Kanae was sitting in a chair and in front of her was Shinobu, who was sitting on her bed watching Kanae sadly because of what had happened. Shinobu knew that Kanae was with Giyu and she had to respect it, but it was very difficult for her. How do you hide feelings for someone who supported you so much when you were little? She was lost in her thoughts until she heard Kanae. Kanae. Okay Shinobu, we need to talk about Giyu she said somewhat uncertainly. Shinobu. There's no need to talk, I know you're with him, I have to respect that, and I want you to be happy Nisan, that's why it's best if I stay away from Giyu she said, lowering her head and letting out a few tears. Kanae. That's not it, Shinobu. I know you love Giyu, and I do too, but I don't want you to suffer the same emptiness I felt she said sadly, remembering what it feels like to have your heart broken. Shinobu. But Nisan, Giyu can only be with one person, and you're already his partner. We can't share him like in movies or novels. This is the real world. It's not possible. It simply wouldn't be accepted by people, and even less so by our parents she said sadly, already crying. Kanae. I know, Shinobu, but if we don't try, neither of us gains anything, we only gain suffering, and I don't want that she said, looking her sister in the eyes. Shinobu. What do you mean, or do you perhaps want to she didn't finish speaking because Kanae interrupted her. Kanae. Sharing it, I know it's strange and won't be well received by others, but we have to do it if we both want to be at peace she said, smiling somewhat uncomfortably. Shinobu. No Nisan she said, leaving everything in a very awkward silence between the two. Kanae. But there's no other way, I don't want to be without him, and if one of us stays with him the other suffers, even Yuzui-sensei has 3 wives, so nothing will happen she said somewhat desperately. Shinobu. It doesn't work that way, Nisan. If it were up to me, I'd accept, but she said, remembering who she wouldn't accept that from. Kanae. But what about Shinobu? She said, surprised. Shinobu. Dad, if he hears this he'll never accept it, you know he believes that married people should only be a couple of 2, nothing more than that, that's why he doesn't like seeing Yuzui-sensei she said sadly. Kanae wanted to argue, but Shinobu was right, her father would never accept that and their relationship would fall apart, so her only option was to tell her father when she arrived and hopefully he would accept her. As night fell, Mr. and Mrs. Kocho arrived and saw their daughters sitting in the chairs around the table and noticed a sad look on their faces. Mr. Kocho. My girls, what's wrong? He said, intrigued. Kanae. Dad, Shinobu and I need to talk seriously about something she said sadly, looking at Shinobu who was nervous, but she grabbed her hand to give her confidence. The parents were confused and sat at the table looking at their daughters, who were sad that their father did not understand them. Mr. Kocho. Well, what's this about? He said calmly. Kanae. Shinobu, tell her what's wrong she said, watching as she lowered her head. Shinobu. Mom, Dad, I'm in love with she didn't finish because her mother interrupted her. Mrs. Kocho. Kaya that's great and tell me who he is, he's tall, do you know him, do we know him she said with sparkles in her eyes. Shinobu. They know him, but there's a problem she said sadly. Mr. Kocho. What's the problem? If you're worried we won't accept him, don't worry, we'll accept him if you think he's a good person, he said smiling. Shinobu. The one I like is Giyuu, she said, causing total silence in the room. Her parents were wide-eyed and speechless. Mrs. Kocho was somewhat frightened by her husband's possible reaction. Mr. Kocho. Shinobu, that's not right, he said coldly, looking at his daughter who lowered her head in a sign of sadness. She already regretted it and wanted to cry, but her father wasn't going to accept that. Mrs. Kocho. Honey, calm down, she said, grabbing his hand. Honey. Dad, can I talk? She said, sounding a little scared, and saw her father nod his head, looking calmer. Honey. You see, the thing is, Shinobu confessed to Giyuu-kun today, she said, making her father look at her seriously. It turns out that Shinobu fell into a depression when Giyuu and I started our relationship, and that's how it was for the month in which she repressed her feelings, but today she confessed and I heard that she was suffering a lot. I know that your father doesn't accept these things, but I want you to allow me to have my relationship with Giyuu alongside Shinobu, she said, looking at him. Mr. Kocho. Kani, I understand that you don't want your sister to go through that pain. Your mother and I experienced it when we broke up with our first partners, but in my opinion, it's not right, he said, leaving Kani and Shinobu feeling sad. Shinobu wanted to cry. She didn't want to be there. She wanted to leave and get away from everything, but her father said something that surprised everyone. Mr. Kocho. But that would only be if it were someone other than Giyuu, he said, smiling and surprising the two of them. Mrs. Kocho. Honey, are you sure? She said somewhat uncertainly. Mr. Kocho. I trust Giyuu. I wanted him to be with one of you because he's a good person, respectful, a little insecure, but he helps those he cares about. That's why I'll make an exception to my own thoughts. You two have my permission to be with Giyuu, he said, smiling at them and seeing them shed tears of happiness as they stood up and hugged their father. Mr. Kocho. But you need to know Giyuu's answer, he said, a little serious. The two of them said. Okay, thank you very much, Dad, before quickly running out of the house to go get Giyuu from his apartment while at the Kocho house. Mrs. Kocho. Are you sure about what you said? She said, watching her husband smile. Mr. Kocho. Yes, I trust Giyuu. He proved it himself when Kani was hurting. He never took advantage of her and helped her without ulterior motives, just wanting her to be okay. Shinobu is the same case. He never took advantage of either of them. He only wanted them to be alright. Even after those two confessed, he didn't want to cause Kani any problems and said without hesitation that if he wanted, he would have to stay away from them. That's why Giyuu is one of the kindest people in this rotten world, he said, looking at his wife and smiling. Mrs. Kocho. I'm just happy to be able to have many grandchildren, she said smiling broadly, and Mr. Kocho laughed a little. While at Giyuu's apartment, he heard a noise at the door and went to see what it was. When he opened the door, he saw his girlfriend and he didn't know if she was his friend or something else after what happened, but he fell to the floor when they threw themselves at him, closing the door. Giyuu. What's happening? He said, sounding somewhat pained. Honey. Well, now Shinobu and I are your girlfriend, she said, smiling broadly and hugging Giyuu. Giyuu. How, that's not by he didn't finish because Shinobu gave Giyuu his first kiss. He was inexperienced and Giyuu didn't know whether to accept it. He saw Kani smiling warmly and she nodded and he accepted the kiss. When the lack of air became apparent, Shinobu separated herself, smiling broadly and with some tears of happiness. Shinobu. My parents accepted it and I have the opportunity to be with you, Giyuu-kun, she said happily, hugging him. Honey. And don't think I'm joking, I do accept, we can be a good couple, the three of us, Giyuu-kun, she said, giving him a kiss on the lips. Undoubtedly, something very good happened between the butterflies and Giyu Tomioka, who charmed the hearts of both. Chapter 13. We find ourselves in Giyuu's apartment where he was waking up. The sun's rays pierced through his curtains, hitting his face. He was somewhat annoyed by this and frowned as they hit his face, opening his eyes a little so the rays wouldn't affect his vision. His loose, somewhat disheveled hair on his pillow served as an extra pillow and he was determined to get up, but he felt two forces on either side of him. He turned to the side, seeing his girlfriend Kanae Kocho asleep with a smile, hugging him and with a calm expression as she felt warmth, but she wasn't the only one. On his other side was his new and current girlfriend, Shinobu Kocho, also by his side, hugging him with the same calm expression and a genuine smile, something that Giyuu loved to see. The memories of what happened before they went to sleep hit him like a blow. He remembered how both girls arrived with smiles on their faces and rushed to him in a hug, telling him the news that they were now both his girlfriends, which brought a smile to Giyuu's face. Tomioka truly loved both girls. They helped him with many of his negative emotions after the death of his beloved sister Tsutako Tomioka. Although he never said so, he did have feelings for them in the past, but he never spoke of them because of his insecurities. That's why he met Daki, and what happened, happened, and now he was in this situation. Although he was surprised that both girls were wearing one of his shirts, they were too big for them, and he didn't remember lending them that clothing, nor did he remember how they ended up sleeping in his room. He had a guest room where he let them both sleep so they wouldn't be uncomfortable. That room had a normal pajama set. There was no gender, neither feminine nor masculine, it was just a white pajama set. Giyuu? How are they here and have my shirts? Tomioka thought in surprise, his eyes now fully open and his five senses active. Tomioka trying to move caused both girls to start making slight grunts from the movement. Giyuu wasn't rough, he just moved his arms and body slightly so he could get up and wake them up in the process. His action achieved its purpose, causing both girls to begin opening their eyes. Their vision was somewhat blurred from barely waking up. They felt their bodies warm, still maintaining their calm expression, but changing their smiles for an expression of confusion. They knew what was happening and who had moved since they themselves had gone into Giyuu's room to sleep with him. The shirt situation was a bit strange since they didn't like the pajamas in the guest room, so when they entered Giyuu's room, they looked for something more comfortable and only found that. They had to admit that although it was big for both of them, it was very comfortable, it wasn't tight and it didn't let in any air, it was simply comfortable for both of them. Returning to the present, they saw Giyuu, somewhat tired, yawning while rubbing one eye with his hands before speaking. "Annie? Giyuu-kun, don't move too much," she said, still a little sleepy, hugging Giyuu and closing her eyes again. "Shinobu? Nii-san and I tried to get some sleep, you should rest too," she said as she, like Annie, closed her eyes, hugging Giyuu and trying to fall asleep again. Tomioka was somewhat doubtful about how his two girlfriends were behaving. He knew very well that they were both rather lazy when it came to getting up, so much so that on several occasions, even when they weren't a couple, he had to go and get them up so they wouldn't miss their classes. Luckily for Giyuu, today wasn't a day of studying. It was a holiday which he could enjoy with them, and this time he would let them sleep in. He returned the hug as best he could to both girls who smiled at the gesture of the one they loved. The trio fell back into the world of dreams. Kani was on the right side, her head resting on Giyuu's chest like a firm pillow, and Shinobu on the left side, her head on Giyuu's shoulder, while the rest of her hugged Giyuu's arm. Some time passed and the three of them woke up at 9:30 in the morning completely hungry. Their instincts to eat awoke in the form of a noise in the stomach of both sisters who were awake, and they blushed with embarrassment that Giyuu heard them, and the response they received was a slight laugh from Giyuu. "Giyuu? It looks like you're hungry. Tell me what you want to eat," he said smiling as he got up to go to the living room to give them some food. "Annie? Come closer," she said, blushing slightly as she covered her blush with Giyuu's shirt. Only her legs from the knees down were uncovered, and in Giyuu's eyes, she looked very cute. Shinobu was in the same state. He approached them, staying close to hear what they would ask for, but instead of receiving a verbal response, he received a calm kiss from Kani on his lips. He knew she did this normally and accepted the kiss, placing his hand on her cheek. Annie loved tasting Giyuu's lips. He might be cold at times, but his lips were simply warm, so warm that she melted at their touch, only to separate for lack of air. "Annie? I wanted that and some pancakes please," she said sweetly to Tomioka, who gave her a smile. "Giyuu? Of course, and you Shinobu, what do you want for breakfast?" he said kindly to the younger of the Kocho as he approached her, and she was somewhat blushing. Without thinking, she gives him a kiss, a rather passionate one on the lips. Giyuu was surprised. He hadn't expected Shinobu to kiss him so suddenly, but he accepted it until the lack of air became apparent to both of them, causing them to separate. "Shinobu? The same as Nii-san," she said with a smile, and Giyuu returned the smile to Shinobu, but she again trapped him in a kiss. Tomioka and the older Kocho were surprised by the younger Kocho's actions. They didn't know that side of her, and now they witnessed it when she kissed Giyuu, and they separated again. "Giyuu? And the kiss because Shinobu," he said, still somewhat surprised. "Shinobu? Sorry, it's just that I'm so happy to have you here. Kani already enjoys your lips so much and I wanted to too," she said with a somewhat mischievous tone, surprising Kani and Giyuu who smiled at her. "Giyuu? I understand, Shinobu, but don't worry, I'll always be there for you both, no matter what," he said, giving Shinobu a quick kiss on the forehead as she hugged them. The three of them hugged so that Giyuu could leave them in the room while he went to make breakfast for the three of them while in the room. "Annie? You look very happy, Shinobu," she said with a smile on her face, looking at her younger sister. "Shinobu? It's just that the way we are seems like a dream, I had little hope of being with him since he was with you, and now I can be with him too," she said smiling while she let out a tear of joy. "Annie? I'm glad to know you can be happy like me, but I think we need to change," she said, noticing her hair was a bit disheveled, just like Shinobu's. "Shinobu? I don't want to, Giyuu's shirt is very comfortable," she said with a small pout on her face, her cheeks puffed out a little, making her look very cute. "Annie? Who said we'd give up Giyuu's shirt? Honestly, they're more comfortable than our own pajamas. How about we ask him if we can use it? She said, smiling. Shinobu. Are you sure he won't get angry about that? The younger Kocho said somewhat uncertainly at the idea that her beloved might get angry with them for that. Hanny. We know Giyuu and I don't think he'll be angry, at most he'll be a little embarrassed about it, she said, smiling while hugging herself, still wearing Giyu's shirt. Shinobu. Okay, she said as she lay back down on the bed, because it was true that they were somewhat lazy. A few minutes passed during which the sisters were asleep again in Giyu's bed, but they woke up due to a sudden movement and the touch of a hand on their shoulders. They didn't want to, but they had to. When they were up, they saw in front of them eyes as blue as the sea looking at them with a little sparkle. Those eyes were Giyu's, and they loved looking at them. They were mesmerizing, making them want to get lost in his gaze. Giyu. It seems you sleepy butterflies are finally waking up, he said with a smile. Both sisters blushed at the nickname but liked it and looked at Giyu with a tray of food. The Kocho's eyes sparkled when they saw their food. It was a small tower of pancakes with some honey and a cup of coffee. It was exquisite in their eyes. Giyu. If you don't eat, it's going to get cold, or do I have to feed you? He said somewhat mockingly, and both sisters blushed at that but nodded. Giyu was shocked by that and a little embarrassed, but he gave them a warm smile, taking the cutlery in his hands, cutting the pancakes a little, and bringing them closer to his mouth. Both girls opened their mouths to receive the food and had to say that when it entered their mouths a lot of flavor came out, it was simply delicious, their sense of taste savored the flavor with every bite they took of the food. When they finished, they were satisfied and grateful for the breakfast Giyu gave them both, but it was time to ask what they wanted. Hanny. Giyu-kun, do you think you could do us a favor? She said, smiling somewhat shyly at the idea of asking him to lend them his shirt to sleep in. Giyu. Of course, that's what it's about, he said, smiling warmly at both of them. Shinobu. Well, we wanted to ask if you would let us keep the shirts we're wearing as pajamas, she said, red-faced, waiting for Giyu's answer. Giyu. HMPH. It's a bit strange, but why are they asking me for that, especially since they're using my shirts? He said, as doubt got the better of him, like the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. Hanny. Well, the pajamas you gave us before were uncomfortable, so we looked for something more comfortable and found your shirts. They're more comfortable, she said, just as red-faced as her sister Shinobu. Giyu. I see, well you can keep them, I don't usually use them much, so there won't be a problem, he said normally, and both girls gave him a hug. Without a doubt he was very understanding in some things, and they loved that. When they broke apart from the hug, Giyu gave them the clothes they had worn yesterday so they could change and be comfortable. He was aware that they had only stayed overnight because of how late it was when they arrived at his apartment, so he would accompany them home just in case, as he didn't want them to be in any danger. Undoubtedly, this was complicated, having two girlfriends, but he didn't care anymore. He just wanted to enjoy his time with them. Chapter 14. A few weeks had passed, which turned into 3 months in which everything went well. Giyu was having a great time with his two girlfriends. They were very patient and good to him, although he didn't deny that there were times when they drove him a little crazy because they were jealous to a point. He understood Kani because she had been cheated on by Sanemi, but he didn't expect it from Shinobu. But he wasn't complaining. He was happy for them, even though he now saw a comical scene in their words. The two Kocho girls were fighting while each one tried to dominate the other by tickling her, but what was happening? Well, it turns out that tomorrow was Mother's Day, and both girls were fighting over what they were going to give their mother as a gift. Shinobu. I told you they'll be sweets, you know mom loves them, she said while trying to move Kani's hand away from her, which was squashing her two cheeks. Kani. No, it will be a good meal, she said while she had Shinobu under her. Giyu wondered how they got to this point and especially why they were fighting on top of his apartment bed. He had cleaned and made his bed and now it was completely messed up. A small vein throbbed on his head and he spoke authoritatively. Giyu. Kani Kocho and Shinobu Kocho are going to stop fighting right now, he said a little coldly, scaring both sisters who turned to look at Giyu and were even more scared. Kani. Giyu, she said somewhat startled. Giyu. Nothing, now you're going to get up and explain to me what's going on, he said, and both sisters thought it was their dad when he got angry with them when they fought and they thought they were little girls. Giyu was startled by that. Both sisters puffed out their cheeks as their eyes watered and then. Kani Shinobu. Wawa, practically both sisters started crying as if they were little girls. Giyu. Oh no, he said, seeing both of them crying, already standing on their knees, hugging each other, saying. Kani Shinobu. Giyu-kun doesn't love us, they said, still crying, hugging each other, giving Giyu a very tender look. Giyu. Don't worry, I love you both, he said, giving them both a hug while stroking their heads, then stepping back and drying their tears. Giyu. Yes, I love you, but please don't make that kind of mess, he said as he kissed both girls on the forehead, making them blush. Annie. Ah really, she said, still pouting. Giyu. Yes, he said, smiling at both of them, then help them up now that you're calmer, can you explain what's going on? He said to both girls. Shinobu. Well, we were discussing what gift to give our mother and I was thinking of giving her some sweets, and Nissan said that a meal for mom would be better, she said, while she was still thinking of giving her mother some sweets. Giyu. You know, you could give her a nice meal and some sweets for dessert. It would be a double gift for her mother, he said with a poker face. Both sisters started thinking about things and blushed with embarrassment at fighting like that. Giyu. There are times when I wonder if you two really are the smartest, he said somewhat mockingly, and they both got a little angry. Annie. Giyu Tomioka, now you've really angered me, she said, and with a swift movement she subdued Giyu, throwing him onto the bed with herself on top of him. Giyu. Wait, calm down, he said, somewhat scared by what his girlfriend would do. Annie. No, Shinobu, come here, you're going to help me, she said, smiling broadly. Shinobu. Of course, Nissan, she said in the same way, standing next to her sister. Giyu looked a little scared and they both started to tickling him, don't get the wrong idea, they both tickled him when they were angry as revenge when he sometimes made fun of their nonsense, and they knew he was joking, but they did it anyway. Giyu. Jaja why you parent, pardon Jaja, I said laughing. Shinobu. No, she said, still tickling him. Giyu. Hahaha, I give up, he said, unable to breathe from laughing so much. Both sisters stood up, looked at him, and gave their boyfriend a tender kiss on the lips before getting up. Giyu. Well, I'm going to help you with your mother's gift today because I'll be busy tomorrow, he said, going to the kitchen with them. The next day. Both sisters entered their mother's room where she was sleeping next to their father and gave their mother a big hug. Annie. Shinobu. Happy Mother's Day. They said excitedly, hugging their mother. This is Kocho. Oh my girl, she said happily, returning their hug. Annie. Come on, let's have breakfast, we have a surprise for you, she said cheerfully. After a while, the sisters and their parents went downstairs and saw on the table a vase with pink flowers, some plates with pancakes and orange juice, and it said, Happy Mother's Day. This is Kocho. You did this, my girl, she said excitedly. Shinobu. Well, we had help from Giyu, he knows how to cook well, she said happily. After that they had a good time laughing a little, that day was going to be a special day for Mrs. Kocho and Giyu. Well, he was in the cemetery, looking at his parents' graves, especially his mother's. Giyu. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I hope you have a good day wherever you are, he said, leaving a bouquet of flowers and beginning to pray for her. Giyu. I still remember what you said, that you would always be with me. Maybe you're not physically here, but you are accompanying me from heaven. I wish you could have met those two butterflies. You would have liked them, he said, letting out a tear. Giyu. Enjoy wherever you are, thank you for giving me life, without you I wouldn't have been able to be with those I love. We must always love our mothers despite everything. They gave us life so we could enjoy it. Chapter 15. About 4 months passed after Mother's Day. Giyu had to sleep alone in his apartment that time. He didn't mind it much since he got used to it, although he did like it when Shinobu and Kani slept with him. But we won't focus on him now, but on the Kocho sisters. They stood in front of their mother, blushing, because their mother had asked them a rather embarrassing question. This is Kocho. When do you plan to marry Tomioka? She said cheerfully, looking at her daughters who didn't know what to say. Annie. Isn't it a bit premature to think about that? She said, red-faced. Shinobu. I support Nissan, it's too soon to think about that, she said, blushing. This is Kocho. Not at all, I want them to get married and give me lots of grandchildren, said the smiling mother to her daughters who were very red. Annie. Mommy. She said, red-faced just like Shinobu. This is Kocho. Come on, daughter, give that to your mother, I just want some grandchildren to pamper and spoil, although I have a doubt, she said looking at her daughters. Shinobu. What is it? She said, still embarrassed. This is Kocho. If they've already done that with Giyu, she said mischievously, looking at her daughters who were already bursting with embarrassment. Annie. We didn't do that with him, nor do we plan to until after marriage, she said without thinking about her words. This is Kocho. So you're going to get married, huh? She said mockingly, and Kani was already fuming. Shinobu. Mom, stop asking those questions, she said, blushing deeply at her mother's attitude. This is Kocho. Excuse me, but don't say that you'll do that after the wedding. I said the same thing and your father off, better not say anything. I think it's better if you go with Tomioka since there will be noise today, she said mischievously and very red-faced, daydreaming. Both girls understood what their mother meant and decided something. Annie. Shinobu. We're going with Giyu today, we want to sleep, they said as they left with their things and some keys they had to Giyu's apartment. They would leave for Giyu's apartment, which wasn't very far away. They knew how noisy their mother was. Many nights they hadn't slept well because of their mothers and fathers' loud moans. They had even lost their innocence because of them one night when their parents used very strong language. "Annie. I'm surprised that our mother, who has such a saintly face, is such a pervert," she said, somewhat surprised. She never thought that about her mother. "Shinobu. You can say that again, if it weren't for the earplugs we wouldn't have slept well, although I still have trauma from mom's vocabulary that night," she said somewhat scared. "Annie. You can say that again, sometimes I wonder how these are our genes, I hope I'm not a pervert like mom," she said, blushing slightly. "Shinobu. Same here, but we're here now," she said as they arrived at Giyu's apartment building while they were talking. Although they had a doubt would Giyu be capable of doing that to them before marriage. They didn't distrust him, but they had that doubt. Their mothers had told them that no matter what kind of relationship they had, lust was always present, and that's why they doubted him. They entered the apartment thinking Giyu wouldn't be awake, but when they went in they saw him drinking water with a red face. "Annie. Giyu. What's wrong?" she said, surprised to see him like that. "Giyu. Don't ask and don't say anything, your father called me and told me in detail what would happen at your house," he said red-faced while drinking cold water to calm down. "Shinobu. Forgive my parents," she said, embarrassed. "Giyu. Nothing's wrong, I'm just surprised that his parents are like that," he said, now calmer and with his face back to normal. "Annie. We're in the same boat," she said, still surprised by that. "Shinobu. Let's get some sleep," said red-faced. The three of them went to the same room and each one already had their pajamas. Giyu had a normal shirt and some loose pants. Annie and Shinobu only had one of Giyu's shirts that was too big for them, reaching down to their crotches, and their panties. It was more comfortable for them since the pajamas were too hot. Although now that they thought about it, several times when they slept with Giyu like that he respected them, never looking at anything other than their faces and not their bodies, it was a sign that Giyu respected them and was not like those who only thought about sex. The three of them lay down on the bed to start sleeping, or well almost. Kani and Shinobu were using Giyu's chest as a pillow, it was very comfortable, and he had them in his arms hugging them. They weren't sleeping because of the discomfort since they had talked about sex with their mother and father. It was awkward how they were, until Kani asked. "Annie. Giyu-kun, can Shinobu and I ask you something?" she said somewhat uncertainly. "Giyu. What's wrong?" he said normally. "Shinobu. You would be capable of wanting sex for pure pleasure," she said somewhat uncertainly. "Giyu. No," he said, surprising the two girls. "Annie. But why?" she said, wanting to confirm. "Giyu. Sigh well, I know what sex is, Ni-san explained it to me before, but I'm not interested. I respect you both. I would never do anything to you that you didn't want until you felt ready," he said normally, caressing the heads of his girlfriends who were happy that Giyu respected them. "Shinobu. Thank you, Giyu-kun," she said smiling as she hugged Giyu. "Annie. Yes, thank you very much," she said, blushing because her boyfriend was very respectful towards them. "Giyu. You're welcome, now let's go to sleep and forget about that topic please," he said as he began to close his eyes. Before going to sleep, the two sisters gave him a kiss on the lips, which he returned. "Annie. Although the idea of doing that doesn't sound bad," thought the eldest of the Kocho family. "Shinobu. I think the idea of having sex isn't so bad," thought red-faced as she began to fall asleep with Giyu. Chapter 16. It was midnight and Giyu was waking up because he could barely breathe. He wanted to breathe heavily through his mouth since he couldn't get enough air until he opened his eyes and noticed Kani kissing him. This wasn't normal since it was night and Kani was supposed to be asleep, as was Shinobu. What surprised him most was that the kiss, instead of being calm as it always was, this time was desperate. He didn't know what was happening, he didn't know why Kani was doing that until he felt her bite his lower lip and instinctively he opened his mouth and she put her tongue in. The French kiss was something inexperienced. It was the first time they had that kind of kiss, but he felt a slight pain in his neck. He couldn't even move because Kani was on top of him kissing him, and with his eyes, he noticed a certain black hair with black tips clinging to him. It was none other than Shinobu, but he noticed something. She was kissing his neck, or rather, kissing and biting it. He didn't understand what was happening. He tried to move, but couldn't because both women were on top of him, preventing him from moving. Giyu could barely breathe until luckily both girls also separated due to the lack of air. There I noticed that their faces had a blush adorning them, I didn't understand what was happening, I was just panting for lack of air. Giyu. What are you doing? He said with some difficulty due to the lack of air he had. Annie. We want you, she said somewhat embarrassed, looking at Giyu who blushed at that. Shinobu. We want to give you our first time, she said red-faced, looking at Giyu in a desirous way, who wasn't looking any better. Giyu. Wait, he said but didn't finish because Shinobu gave him a passionate kiss, biting his lower lip, causing him to open his mouth, and she put her tongue in. The kiss, just like with Kanae, was inexperienced, but Giyu didn't accept the kiss because he didn't want to do that to them. They had talked about doing it when they felt ready, but not now. Kanae, for her part, kissed Giyu's neck on the right side, giving him light bites. Again, due to lack of air, they separated, gasping for air. Giyu? And no, we can't do this, we said when they feel ready, he said somewhat angrily. Kanae? We know it's too soon, but we wanted. You were the one who always supported me without ulterior motives, even when we slept in skimpy clothes you didn't try anything, you just slept with us, she said, blushing, with a tear escaping her eye. Shinobu? You always respected us. At the academy, most of them wanted our bodies, they only sought us out for Hex, and all you wanted was our friendship and company. And now, even as our boyfriend, you didn't seek that, only to be with us. That's why we want to give you our first time, Giyu-kun, she said, blushing, still on top of Giyu. Giyu was impressed by what they were saying. He didn't want to do it with them, but he saw the desire in both girls' eyes, so that they wouldn't regret it, he decided to ask. Giyu? I just want to confirm, remember there's no going back, so I ask you, are you sure? He said as he saw them hesitate a little. Annie Shinobu? Yes, we want this, they said, blushing, looking at Giyu, who swallowed hard. Giyu? Oh okay, he said, giving Shinobu a normal kiss. She accepted the kiss, inserting her tongue, and Giyu, having gained some experience, accepted it this time. Annie continued kissing Giyu's neck while slipping one of her hands under Giyu's shirt, noticing Giyu's well-defined abdomen. She blushed at this, but she felt the heat increasing, and her blush continued. Shinobu broke away from the kiss with Giyu, looking at him with a blush, but noticed Kanae stop kissing his neck and how her hand was under Giyu's shirt. They were blushing, just like Giyu. They didn't quite know what to do since they had no experience. They knew about Hex from their studies and knew they would have to have Giyu's member inside their vaginas, so they were very nervous, something Giyu noticed. Giyu? You know that if you want to stop you can tell me, he said calmly, looking at them, who smiled a little shyly. Kanae? Oh okay, we want this, she said nervously. Shinobu? It's just that we're nervous, we have no experience with this, she said, blushing with embarrassment. Giyu? I don't know much about this either, said Red. Kanae? I'll just take off your clothes, she said, red-faced. Asking Giyu to take off his shirt was very embarrassing. Giyu? Oh okay, he said nervously, starting to take off his shirt in front of the two sisters, who blushed. They knew Giyu exercised but never expected to see him so well built. They felt a strong heat in their faces, along with their private parts starting to get a little warm. Wapid, forgive me. Both sisters were red-faced and didn't quite know what to do. They knew they would have to take off their clothes too, but they were so red-faced that they couldn't be okay. Giyu? I ask you again, do you want to continue? He said to his girlfriends. Annie Shinobu? Yes again, they said decisively, looking at Giyu. The three of them were sitting on the bed and Kanae kissed him on the lips while a hand roamed over his body. Shinobu was behind Giyu, calmly kissing his neck, while Giyu, with one hand, slipped under Kanae's shirt, touching her legs. She shuddered slightly at the warm touch of Giyu's hand on her legs, and Shinobu also felt a hand on her thighs. They were nervous about it, but they wanted it, so they thought it was okay. They continued like this for a while, with them kissing Giyu while touching his chest and abdomen with their hands, eliciting sighs from Giyu at the touch of their hands. And Giyu was touching his girlfriend's thighs, causing both of them to feel a kind of heat in their private parts, while their bodies felt somewhat relaxed. Until the lack of air caused them to have to separate, while Kanae and Giyu had a thread of saliva joining their mouths which disappeared later, and Shinobu separated from the neck, leaving a mark. Kanae? Guy Giyu, I like what you're doing, she said, blushing, still feeling Giyu's hands on her legs, more specifically her thighs, which Giyu found very soft. Shinobu? We want to continue more, said Red, catching her breath. Giyu? Okay, I'll try to please you, he said, red-faced, looking at both girls, who smiled at that. Kanae? I think we're being unfair by only leaving you without clothes, she said as she began to take off her shirt, revealing her panties and bra. Shinobu? I support Nissan, she said in the same way, taking off her shirt and revealing her panties and bra. Note. This is the only reference I could find. Wappet is going to ban me, pray I don't get cancelled. Giyu blushed when he saw them and looked away in embarrassment. Kanae? What's wrong, Giyu-kun, don't you like our bodies? She said, red-faced, provocatively approaching Giyu, who was nervous. Shinobu? Come on, don't be afraid, we're not going to bite you, or maybe we will. They were giving in to their deepest carnal desires. The two girls were looking at Giyu, who still had his pants on, and decided to pull them down, leaving him in his boxers, which had a small bulge. Both sisters knew what it was and blushed when they saw it still covered up. Giyu blushed at that and covered his private parts a little. Kanae? I think we should take everything off, she said, blushing, well unsure whether to do it. Shinobu? Giyu-kun, you can take off your bra, she said somewhat mischievously, and Giyu was very embarrassed, and Kani became jealous. Annie? Me too, she said while blushing. Annie sat on Giyu's lap while with her hands she grabbed Giyu's hands, placing them on her back where the clasp of her bra was, while she had a smile. Annie? Help me take it off please, she said, blushing, looking at Giyu who was red with embarrassment but obeyed his girlfriend's request, starting to unhook the bra she was wearing so that it ended up falling and leaving Kani's breasts exposed, leaving Giyu somewhat mesmerized by the sight. Annie? You like them, don't you? She said somewhat mockingly, making Giyu look away. Shinobu? I'm still here, don't leave me behind, she said, standing behind Giyu and pressing her body against his, causing his body to heat up even more. He had lost count of how many times he had blushed. Shinobu wasn't wearing her bra, and Giyu felt her skin brushing against his, he felt Shinobu's nipples, it was warm, but he felt something soft in his hand. He turned his gaze forward and saw that Kani was holding his hand on her chest. He looked at her face and noticed a crimson hue adorning it. On impulse, he began to squeeze it a little gently, causing Kani to sigh softly, until he accidentally squeezed a little harder and elicited a moan from Kani. Kani? Ah, Giyu-kun, she said, a little surprised. Giyu? Sorry, he said sadly. Shinobu? You turned out to be a pervert, Giyu, she said somewhat mockingly. Kani? Relax, Giyu, it's normal to have those desires, just be gentle, she said, blushing, as she moved closer and gave Giyu a passionate kiss, while provocatively moving her hips to awaken his member. Giyu continued the kiss, already caught up in the lust, moving one of Kani's breasts, who moaned softly from Giyu's kiss. While Shinobu reached under Giyu's boxers with her hands, searching for his member and finding it, he began by placing both hands on it, noticing that his two hands were not enough to cover it. Lemon skipped. Kani? So if I dreamed that you cheat on me, you would do it? She said somewhat uncertainly. Giyu? Never, I will fulfill your dreams, Kani, dreams that you want to come true, he said, smiling and giving her a kiss on the forehead. Kani? I knew you wouldn't, but I like hearing you say that, she said smiling as she snuggled up to Giju's chest and fell asleep. Meanwhile, at the Kocho house. Mr. Kocho? Ah dear, I have a feeling that our daughters have lost something, he said, sounding somewhat worried. Mrs. Kocho? Don't worry, they're with Giyu, nothing will happen, she said, lying on her husband's chest, unaware of what had happened. Chapter 17. It was morning, Giyu woke up somewhat agitated, he still felt something liquid on his body, it was sweat, because the action of the night caused him an exhaustion that made him sweat too much, although he noticed a certain weight on top of him. He looked down and noticed the sisters. Memories flooded his mind, making him blush deeply, though now he had a doubt. Giyu? How do I explain to Mr. Kocho that I did it with his daughters? Tomioka thought worriedly, he knew that his girlfriends would try to calm the man down, but he was afraid of what he would do to him. He looked down again and saw both sisters still asleep, their bodies exposed, asleep on his chest, with a smile of complete satisfaction. Giyu? They look so cute when they sleep, he whispered, using his hands to stroke their heads, which made them snuggle closer to Giyu, who just chuckled softly. Giyu? I'm happy to have them, he thought while they were still in bed, but he wondered what time it was. He turned his head slightly, looking at a clock in his room, and saw that it was 9 in the morning. Luckily, there were no classes, otherwise he didn't know what the two sisters would do if they had trouble walking. Another while passed and both sisters also woke up and noticed the state they were in, and just like Giyu, memories of everything they did that night with Giyu came back to them and they were flushed but satisfied by it. Giyu? Good morning, sleepyheads, he said, smiling at them and noticing that they were calm. Kani? Good morning, Giyu-kun, he said, hugging Giyu. Shinobu? Good morning, Giyu-kun, she said, also hugging Giyu who was smiling. Giyu? I'm surprised at how lazy my butterflies can be, she said, looking at them. Kani? Well, now we have a reason, you took our virginity and we need to rest, our hips hurt, she said, blushing as she hid her face. Giyu? Don't worry, I'll let you rest, but if you'll excuse me, I have to make lunch, he said, stroking both of their heads. Shinobu? I don't want to. You're too comfortable. Your body is like a hard firm pillow, and I like it, she said, blushing, still lying down. Giyu? Okay, it's a bit strange for you to say that, Shinobu, he said, somewhat uncomfortable with the comment. He hadn't expected that. Giyu still wasn't used to it, he was still shy about that kind of thing, and both Kocho's sisters loved seeing him like that, he always seemed to be the one in charge in the relationship, but in reality both girls knew how to have the advantage against him. Giyu? Now I have a question, how are we going to explain this to his parents? He said nervously about what might happen. Kani? Relax, it was our mother who encouraged us to do this, because I don't know how she does it with dad many times, she said calmly. Giyu? So, their mother, because of a commenter hearing what they were doing, caused them a disturbance, he said calmly. Shinobu. Yep, but well I think I am hungry, besides we have to buy the pill otherwise Nissan and I will get pregnant, she said red. Giyuu. Well then let me get up, I'll go to the pharmacy next door and buy those pills he said calmly, standing up. Both sisters wanted to stand up but their legs wouldn't respond. Shinobu. Okay Giyuu-kun, but remember that you'll have to take care of us today, because our legs won't work because of you she said, blushing and pouting. Giyuu. Well I'll be back in a moment he said, changing his clothes, then grabbing his keys and heading out to get the pill. Giyuu had never experienced hex, but he had to say he liked it. He arrived at the pharmacy and went in. Now that he thought about it, if he asked for that pill, the person in charge would probably look down on him. He had to pretend he didn't know anything. He looked for the pills because both sisters told him which ones they were, and when he saw them he thought there was nothing special about them. He just grabbed a small package to go to the register to find out how much it was, since the price wasn't listed. He had a considerable amount of money with him just in case, and when it was his turn he put the package on the counter. Giyuu. How much would it be? He asked with his normal, somewhat expressionless face, and the man looked at him somewhat mischievously. Sir. Oh, I see you want to prevent some things, kid, I understand he said, putting his hand on Giyuu's shoulder, who looked at him seriously. Giyuu. I don't know what you mean, I was just sent to buy this. Please tell me the price he said, looking at him and seeing that the man was a little flustered but recovered. Sir. That'll be yen, kid he said, watching him take out a fair amount to pay. Giyuu. Here you go he said, taking the pills and giving her the money before leaving. When she left, her face was red because she felt uncomfortable being told that. Giyuu. Thank goodness I can hide my emotions, he thought with relief as he went to his house, or rather apartment. When I arrived, I went in and didn't see anyone in the living room. He went to his room and saw them finishing getting dressed. He didn't care much and spoke. Giyuu. Canny Shinobu, I already brought you the pills he said calmly, seeing that they, who were sitting on the bed, saw him. Canny. Thank you, Giyuu-kun. Leave them there. Could you bring us a glass of water, please? To pass the pill no and Giyuu nodded and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water for each of them. I went back into the room and handed them over, and they both took them. Shinobu. Thank goodness, otherwise we would have been pregnant with you, although the idea of family doesn't sound bad she said, blushing slightly, and Giyuu blushed too. Giyuu. Well, I'm going to the kitchen. I'll bring you your breakfasts in a little while since you can't walk. Then I'll help you go to your parents' house he said as he left and listened. Annie Shinobu. Thank you Giyuu-kun they said and sighed as they went to make breakfast. It was a rather strange morning, I must say. Chapter 18. After a while Canny and Shinobu could walk and it was already afternoon, so they decided to go eat. Giyuu. Tell me what you want to eat. He asked calmly, looking at the two girls who were thinking about what to eat. Canny. I want sushi she said calmly and Shinobu agreed. Shinobu. Yes, I'm craving sushi too she said happily, and Giyuu smiled. Giyuu. Well then, get ready to go he said calmly, watching both sisters smile. Giyuu left the room and gave his clothes to both girls so they could change and go eat as they needed something to eat. Both girls left the room, leaving Giyuu blushing at how they looked. It didn't matter what they were wearing to Giyuu, they were beautiful. Annie. How did we turn out, Giyuu-kun? She said, smiling warmly at Giyuu, who was red-faced and looked away. Shinobu. Ara, what's wrong, Giyuu-kun? Don't you like us? She said, smiling somewhat mischievously. Giyuu. Why you look beautiful said this redeed without looking at them, and they blushed too because of that. Annie. Well, we'd better go said the redeed, fidgeting with her fingers, looking a bit nervous. Shinobu. Why yes, let's go eat, otherwise mom and dad will worry she said, equally red-faced. The three of them left the apartment and headed towards the restaurant or stall that served very good sushi. When they arrived they sat down at a table to order sushi, but the waiter who served them looked at the butterfly sisters with a smile. Boy X. And what will the beautiful ladies want? He said smiling, making both girls uncomfortable. Annie. We want sushi, sir she said without smiling, she felt uncomfortable with how he looked at her and Shinobu. Boy X. Oh sure, I guess both. Tell me what you have planned after this he said, smiling mischievously. Giyuu. They have to go with their parents he said seriously, looking with a cold expression at the boy who looked at him and was frightened by his expression. His gaze frightened the boy, who nodded and stopped asking questions. What was wrong? Giyuu was jealous. He was jealous that someone was flirting with his girlfriends, or as he called them, his butterflies. Boy X. Oh okay, I'll leave he said, scared. While both girls laughed a little when they saw Giyuu like that, they found it endearing to see Giyuu jealous. Annie. Ara Giyuu-kun, are you jealous? she said, looking at Giyu, who blushed and looked away. Giyu. I'm not jealous, he said, looking away with pink cheeks. Shinobu. Oh come on, accepted Giyu-kun, you're jealous, she said, laughing a little, looking at Giyu, who was even redder. Giyu. I'm not jealous, he said with embarrassment in his voice. Both sisters continued to tease Giyu a little for being jealous, but they wouldn't deny that they liked it. They felt protected seeing how Giyu got jealous and wanted that man to go away, although it was somewhat uncomfortable to see that, but they did feel safe with Giyu. Once the food arrived, they ate with gusto and then left, as they had to resume their journey to the Kocho's house. One thing that did happen was that many girls looked at Giyu because of how he dressed. Ignore that he's taking something. Some women looked at him blushing, and one or two with a lustful look, to which both sisters pouted angrily and hugged Giyu's arm, each on one side. Giyu. And then I'm the jealous one, he said, laughing a little, seeing a blush and pout on both sisters. It turns out that despite being happy and trusting each other, they were jealous because they were afraid. Kani and Giyu were afraid of losing each other, since they had already been deceived and didn't want to go through that pain again, and Shinobu was like that because of her fear of no longer having the one she had feelings for. But they tried to control themselves, because they knew that if they made a mistake, things could end badly. When they arrived at the Kocho house, they entered carefully, seeing Mr. Kocho on the sofa, breathing heavily and tired from who knows what. Meanwhile, Mrs. Kocho was walking as best she could, limping, as it seemed to hurt her to walk so much. Annie. Now I understand why Dad was like that those days, she said, watching her father panting wearily. Mrs. Kocho. Oh, hello my girls, what's up? You arrived very lively, she said, smiling warmly. Shinobu. Not much, Mom, but we can see you didn't show any mercy to Dad, she said, blushing slightly as she watched both Kocho blush. Mrs. Kocho. I didn't go overboard, she said, smiling somewhat nervously. Mr. Kocho. I don't stop no matter what, I don't stop all night until 7 in the morning, he said, sweating profusely, embarrassing Mrs. Kocho, who was covering her red face. Annie. Mom, don't you mean to Dad, although I must admit that now I understand why you enjoy that, she said, blushing, surprising her parents, who looked at Shinobu and Giyu somewhat astonished. Mrs. Kocho. Perhaps you, she said, pausing to look at her daughters, who were blushing. Mr. Kocho. Did you lose your virginity? He said, very surprised. Giyu. In my defense, according to what they told me, they wanted to say some things after hearing Mrs. Kocho say them, he said, red with embarrassment. Annie. Shinobu. Giyuu. They shouted, alarmed and very red. Mr. Kocho. I only have one question, Giyu, did you manage to survive? He said, looking at Giyu. Shinobu. He dominated the action, she said, blushing and looking away. Mrs. Kocho. I see my girls, did you enjoy it so much? Tell me all about it, she said, smiling somewhat mischievously, making her daughters blush. Mr. Kocho took Giyu to a room away from the others so they wouldn't hear, and Giyu was nervous. Mr. Kocho. First of all, don't think anything bad, I'm just giving you some advice to survive, he said worriedly, looking at Giyu. Giyu? What's going on? He said, somewhat worried by the word survive that Mr. Kocho said. Mr. Kocho. I'll just tell you one thing, my wife usually has a great hex drive, you know, and we usually do it several times, but I'm telling you that the more we do it, the more the desire increases, and believe me, it gets harder to please her, he said seriously, looking at Giyu. Giyu. But what does this have to do with Kani and Shinobu? He said, not quite understanding what was happening. Mr. Kocho. That's what I'm getting at, imagine this, my daughters inherited several things from my wife, and I think that desire too, and imagine, if I can barely stand it with my wife, imagine my daughters as their desire increases, he said, looking at Giyu, who after a moment turned very pale. Giyu? Any advice? He said, worried and trembling a little. Mr. Kocho. Look Giyu, the only thing I can tell you is to try to go for sensitive points, so that they get to the climax quickly, he said, looking at Giyu. Giyu? I see, he said, sighing and calming down again. Giyu? I don't think they'll inherit that, but I must say that we shouldn't rush things, he said calmly. Mr. Kocho. Okay, I trust you, but calm down for now and good luck too, he said, shaking Giyu's hand, who accepted. They went downstairs and saw Mrs. Kocho smiling with her daughters, who had mischievous smiles on their faces accompanied by blushes. Mr. Kocho. I think we'll have luck now, he said, taking pity on Giyu. Annie. Oh, hi Dad and Giyu, she said, smiling brightly. Shinobu. Hello Dad and Giyu, she said, smiling. Mr. Kocho. What did you talk about? Said curiously, already suspecting what happened. Mrs. Kocho. Just a few tips to help you enjoy it more, she said, smiling mischievously. Giyu. God help me, he said in a whisper that no one heard except Mr. Kocho, who patted him on the back. Annie. Giyu, another day I want to try something that will be fun, she said, smiling somewhat mischievously. Shinobu. Likewise, she said in the same way as her sister. I screamed, swallowed hard, sighed, and nodded calmly. Al parecer Giyu y tiene problemas. Chapter 19. More than 5 years had passed. Many people say that a relationship doesn't last that long, maybe yes or no, who knows, but the relationship between the sisters Kocho and Giyu Tomioka was going very well. The three of them have already graduated and are now living together. Although it may not seem like it, after graduating Giyu and both girls were willing to lead a quiet life living together, each working at what they liked. Annie and Shinobu worked at a hospital, and Giyu was a lawyer. Giyu chose that career because his sister had been one before and he always admired her for how she did justice and he followed in her footsteps. In the case of Kani and Shinobu, they had seen their father become a surgeon, but they didn't like blood very much, but they did help in terms of medical diagnosis, they were in charge of seeing rare diseases. Each of them was good in their field. Giyu had many cases despite being a young lawyer, and his clients were satisfied. There were some cases where he had to defend the aggressor, reducing their sentence by justifying the actions that occurred. That's why he was recognized, since he defended well regardless of whether they were innocent or aggressors. Annie and Shinobu found their cases very difficult, but despite everything they found a way to find the causes, something similar to the series Dr. House, the difference being that they were not cold and thought of every possibility. But we will not focus on that, but on something that Giyu had prepared for them. Giyu felt that it was time. They had been a couple for 5 years without problems, and he felt that it was time. He was going to propose to both sisters. He was nervous about their answer, but he was going to do it. He already had the rings. Annie's was a silver one with a bright pink butterfly design. Shinobu's was the same silver design with a butterfly, but in a purple color. I wanted to give both girls the best, and since they already lived together, I wanted to give the butterfly sisters the best. He had called them a moment ago, but only Shinobu was going to be able to go, since Kani had to do paperwork, which made Giyu sad, but he also understood. It was already afternoon, and Giyu was in a park with Shinobu, both of them happy to be spending time together. Giyu. And how have you been these past few days? He said calmly, looking at Shinobu who was wearing a traditional kimono from the ancient era. It was very beautiful, in Giyu's words. Shinobu. Everything has gone well, some cases are difficult, but nothing that can't be solved, although it does make me sad to see that my sister and I can't do much for others, she said sadly with her head down, as seeing lives that were entrusted to her hand slipping away caused her great sadness. Giyu. Don't feel bad, Shinobu. I'm sure some people might be angry, but if their time has come, there's not much we can do. What matters is that they're doing their best to help others, he said, smiling warmly at her. It should be noted that the area where they were was secluded from people, and nobody could see them. Shinobu. Thank you, you always know what to say, she said, giving Giyu a hug. Giyu. You're welcome, Shinobu, but I wanted to tell you something important, he said, sounding a little nervous. Shinobu. And what is it about, Giyu-kun? She said, looking at her boyfriend. Giyu. Sigh. First of all, I want to thank you for always being by my side along with Kani. Since my sister died, you two have been my support, both very important to me, and from that day I knew that I truly loved you and Kani, and I want to spend my life with you and Kani, that's why I'm asking you, he said, taking out a small box, and Shinobu was shocked, tears welling in her eyes as she wondered what was happening. Giyu. I ask you to be my wife, he said, showing the ring to Shinobu who cried tears of joy at seeing it. Shinobu. CSI acepto di ho dandol un bizo a Giyu para ambos separos y Giyu la puso el anillo a Shinobu. Shinobu. So I'll be Shinobu Tomioka when we get married, she said happily, looking at the ring Giyu gave her. Shinobu. I see you know that my sister and I like butterflies, she said, laughing a little. Giyu. I was planning to propose to both of them, but Kani was busy. But I plan to do it tomorrow, since she'll be very tired when she gets back, he said, laughing a little. Shinobu. Don't worry, she'll accept, and we'll surely be family, Giyu. But let's go home, we have to welcome Kani-ni-san so she can rest well. Giyu. You're right, Shinobu, he said, smiling warmly as they both took Shinobu's hand and started walking towards the house they shared with Kani. They both arrived and saw Kani resting on the sofa, very tired from everything that happened at the hospital. Shinobu. We're here, she said smiling, and Kani looked at them smiling, somewhat tired. Kani. Good afternoon, Shinobu and Giyu, I see you had fun, she said somewhat jealously, looking at them both. Giyu. Just a little, but tomorrow, since you have a day off, I want to invite you out to ask you for something, he said smiling. Kani. Understood, Giyu-kun, but I want to sleep, she said wearily, sighing slightly. Shinobu. I'll make something to drink, Giyu, and take her to rest, she said, smiling warmly. Giyu nodded and carried Kani, who was almost asleep, in a princess-style pose, and she clung to Giyu, hugging him. Giyu. I see that the butterfly needs to rest well, he thought as he went to the room and laid her on the bed to cover her with something so that she could sleep peacefully from exhaustion. Chapter 20. It was a new day and Kanae was waking up, she felt like she was hugging something and she already knew what it was. It was Giyu. She and Shinobu always hugged him and he hugged them carefully too. Giyu. Good morning, sleeping butterfly, he said calmly, looking at Kanae who said nothing and continued hugging him. Kanae. Good morning Giyu-kun, he said, still settling into Giyu. Giyu. I see you were tired from yesterday, he said, looking at Kanae who remembered all the paperwork she had to do at the patient's hospital. Kanae. It's usually tiring, there are many cases these days, but luckily I got a break for everything I did this time with Shinobu, she said, without wanting to get up since the previous day was really tiring. Giyu. I see you're tired, but let me get up, I have to make breakfast, he said calmly, and Kanae, instead of obeying, clung to him even more. Kanae. Nope, I want to sleep a little longer, she said calmly, still sleeping on top of Giyu. Shinobu. I'll go make breakfast this time, Kanae-san seems to need more rest, he said, getting up and stretching a little. Giyu. Well, I'll try to get up from here for a while when Kanae decides to get up, he said calmly, stroking Kanae's head, who clung closer to Giyu. Shinobu. Okay Giyu-kun, but remember that tonight you have to propose that to Nii-san, she said calmly, leaving the room that the three of them shared. A while passed and Kanae got up, feeling more relaxed. Kanae. Hello Giyu-kun, she said happily to be with her partner. Giyu. Hello Kanae, I see you've finally decided to get up, he said, laughing a little, looking at his girlfriend who pouted. Kanae. Muo, you're like a pillow, plus I was tired from work, she said, hugging Giyu who laughed a little. Giyu. Don't worry, but I want to invite you out tonight to tell you something important and so you can clear your head a bit from work, he said, stroking her head. Kanae. Okay Giyu-kun, she said smiling broadly as they both got up and went down to the dining room, seeing Shinobu who had already finished making breakfast. Shinobu. Good morning, you two sleepyheads, breakfast is ready, she said calmly, sitting me down. Kanae. Good morning Shinobu, sorry for waking up late, I was very sleepy yesterday and didn't want to get up, she said, a little nervous. Shinobu. Don't worry, Nii-san, everything's fine. You needed to rest anyway, since you had a lot of work being in a higher position than me, she said, seeing Kanae laugh a little. Giyu. Well, leaving that aside, we have to have breakfast, then everything went relatively normally until the afternoon when Giyu and Kanae got ready to go out on their date. Shinobu said she wasn't going because this was going to be special and her sister should be there alone. This surprised Kanae, but she accepted it. After that, they both went for a walk around the city, passing by the shopping center and seeing some things that caught their attention. Then they went to a restaurant where they ate well and ended up at a viewpoint where there was nobody. It was night, the moon illuminated that place, and it was a beautiful view to see the city from above. Kanae. I had so much fun today, Giyu-kun, she said happily, happy with everything that happened and having such a view. Giyu. I'm glad you liked Kanae, but the reason I asked you out was this, he said, taking a breath and sighing somewhat nervously. Kanae. And what is it you want to ask me, Giyu-kun? She said, looking at Giyu, who seemed a little nervous. Giyu. I wanted to thank you for always being by my side and supporting me since my sister, Kanae, died. We've known each other for a long time and you made me cry, but most importantly, you never left me. You always stayed with me through thick and thin. That's why I wanted to tell you that I want to spend my days with you forever. Would you do me the honor of being my wife? He said, taking out the ring. Kanae was shedding tears with her eyes wide open, looking at the ring that Giyu held in his hands. This was real, it wasn't a lie. Kanae. Yes I accept, she said, giving Giyu a hug who accepted it and then they looked at each other and shared a tender kiss. They separated and Giyu put the ring on her finger. They were both happy. That moment was magical for them, sealed and seen by the moon itself, illuminating them. Kanae. This means that now we will never be alone again, Giyu-kun, she said, hugging him. They both headed home, but Kanae asked. Kanae. And what about Shinobu? She asked curiously, looking at Giyu who swallowed hard for fear that she would get jealous. Giyu. Yesterday I wanted to ask both of you to marry me, and since only Shinobu could come, I asked her to marry me that day, and now I'm asking you, he said, somewhat nervously. Kanae pouted. Muo, it's not fair, but well, you had your reasons, I was tired that day, she said, hugging his arm. This was undoubtedly something that was making the trio happier, as they were now going to spend their days together until death when the wedding day arrived. It was undoubtedly going to be a happy ending for all three of them. Chapter 21. About 4 months had passed. 4 months in which a couple waited for this day, a day they would remember forever. It was beautiful, that enormous church ringing its bells, pink and purple flowers decorating the place, a boy at the altar waiting in a white yukata. It was Giyu Tomioka who was waiting at the altar for his next two wives. He had a smile on his face. Everyone who was invited was there, including the Kocho family, with Mr. and Mrs. Kocho shedding tears of joy at seeing their daughters about to start a family. Also present was Kaijiro Ringoku, who was the husband of the late Tsutako Tomioka. He was carrying a little girl who was wearing a dress and saw her uncle at the altar. That was Fuji Ringoku. Muchos más como Yuzui Tenjin con sus tres esposas Hinatsuru Yuzui, Makio Yuzui y Suma Yuzui También Alegres, También Iguro Obanai, Mitsuri Kanroji, Kanouts Sayori, Tanjiro Kamado, Nezuko Kamado, Inosuke Hashibira, Aoi Kanzaki, Jimiji Majayame, Zenitsu Agatsuma, Genyu Shinazagawa. Surprisingly, the younger Shinazagawa brother had attended, as he held no grudge against Kani or Giyu, for he knew well what his brother had done to earn Kani's contempt. The others were classmates and friends they had made a long time ago. Giyu? What would you think of me if you saw me here, Ni-san, at an altar waiting in a wedding yukata for my girlfriends, and soon my wives? He thought happily, he would have liked his sister and parents to be here to congratulate him. At the last moment, Mikomo and Sabito arrived smiling when they saw their friend waiting. They went to sit down, smiling slightly, with sweat on their foreheads. Sabito. We arrived on time, he said in a small voice that could not be heard. Mikomo. All because I thought it was at a different time, he said, nudging Sabito. They both looked at Giyu and smiled. The while passed and the wedding began, showing the two girls walking in their wedding yukatas with smiles on their faces. Giyu had seen them in all kinds of clothing, but this one was simply superior to all the others he had seen. They were simply beautiful, in his words. Note. I found this for reference. The sisters were also excited to know that this was going to be the happiest day of their lives, and when they saw Giyu they smiled even more. This was a magical moment for them and him, until the priest, or rather Kagaya Shiki, appeared. He was the one who planned the wedding of Yuzui and his three wives, so that no problems would arise, as some priests would have denied it because of their religious beliefs. Kagaya. Good afternoon my children, he said, looking at everyone who smiled, with both sisters already at the altar next to Giyu, each one on his side. Kagaya. Today we are gathered here to unite these three souls in marriage, people who have overcome difficulties and are here together to spend all their time together. Before we begin, let us hear the vows of these three people, he said, smiling broadly as he looked at the three of them. Kagaya. Primero tu Giyu Tomioka di ho viendo a Giyu. Giyu. Well, Kani, Shinobu, I want to thank you so much for always being by my side, supporting me. Here and now, I promise you that I will always love you, I will always be there for you in difficult times, I will always be faithful to you through thick and thin, I will give you the best life, I will do everything I can to make you happy until our last days. I promise that even after death I will always love you. If you ever cry, I promise I will erase that sadness because you are everything to me, he said confidently, making both girls blush as they shed tears of happiness at seeing their boyfriend and husband in such a short time. Kagaya. What a beautiful promise, Giyu Tomioka, and now it's time for the Kocho sisters, go ahead Kani and Shinobu, he said, looking at both girls. Kani? He. Well, me first. Giyu, ever since that incident, you've been by my side without any ulterior motives. You just wanted to see me happy and well, and that's why I say I love you. I promise to be faithful to you. I promise to be the best wife you could ever spend your days with, to give everything I have, so that we can have the best life possible, to cherish every moment with you until the end of our days, to be one of those who fills the void you once had and now fills with me and Shinobu. I promise that no matter what happens, I will love you. She said, smiling and shedding a few tears of happiness as she looked at Giyu. Many looked at everything and smiled, especially Mrs. Kocho, who was reminded of the time she and her husband got married. Shinobu. Well, it's my turn, Giyu. Ever since I found out you were with Ni-san, I've been sad and wanted to ignore that feeling for you, but you came along and helped me. You accepted me alongside Ni-san, and I'm telling you that I love you. I promise, just like Ni-san, to be faithful to you and fill that void you had. I promise to be better than in the past, to help you whenever you're depressed or sad, and to start a family. I also promise to castrate you if you ever think of being unfaithful to both of us, she said with a somber look. All the men present sweated a little and wished Giyu luck, but someone thought something peculiar. Mr. Kocho. It seems some things never change, she's just like her mother when she had to get married, she told me the same thing, he thought, looking at his wife who was smiling even more. Giyu. I promise to be loyal to you, and I've never broken a promise until now, Shinobu, he said, looking at Shinobu who smiled at that. Kagaya. Nice words, although Giyu, you'd better be loyal to them, otherwise you know what awaits you, he said somewhat amused, and Giyu laughed a little nervously at that. Kagaya. Well, with that said, I don't need to say this, but I'll say it anyway. Giyu Tomioka, do you take Kanae Kocho and Shinobu Kocho as your wives? To love and respect them, in good times and bad. In sickness and in health. Until death do you part? He asked, looking at Giyu. Giyu? I accept, he said confidently, looking at Kaguya who smiled. Kaguya. Well, do Shinobu Kocho and Kanae Kocho accept the Tomioka surname? Do they accept Giyu Tomioka as their husband? Do they accept to love and respect him in good times and bad? In sickness and in health? Until death do them part? He asked both sisters. Shinobu Kanae. We accept, they said as Giyu placed the rings on both sisters who cried because at last they were officially husband and wife. Kaguya. Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the brides, he said, watching as Giyu kissed Kanae and then Shinobu. The three of them blushed and everyone started applauding, congratulating the couple who had just gotten married. Everyone shouted in unison. Long live the newlyweds. But there was something missing. The honeymoon. Kanae, Shinobu, and Giyu were nervous. It shouldn't be difficult for them since they had done it before, but they were already married and this time it was going to be their first time as husband and wife. They were in a hotel they had paid for their honeymoon. It was one of those specialized hotels for after weddings and everything was there. From condoms, pills or even aphrodisiacs to let loose at night, a very large red heart-shaped bed. The three of them were nervous because although they had done it before, it was somewhat embarrassing to do it in that bed and after getting married, they were finding it difficult. Giyu. If you don't want to, we won't, he said, red-faced, looking away while his two wives were also red-faced. Kanae. It's fine, it's just that she was so nervous that she couldn't help but stutter. Shinobu. It's the first time we've done it in this kind of place, she said, blushing. It must be said that Giyu and both sisters, in the years they were together, did so very passionately, as it turns out that both sisters inherited that carnal desire that their mother had and they did it whenever they could, not to mention the things they did. Giyu. You decide, I already told you I will never force you, he said more calmly. Kanae. I do want to, she said, blushing. Shinobu. I won't let you do it and leave me out, she said, looking at them. Giyu. I'll never leave anyone behind, so relax Shinobu, he said calmly. Kanae. So what are we waiting for, Giyu-kun? She said, approaching him and planting a kiss on Giyu's lips, taking him by surprise, who accepted Kanae's kiss. Shinobu didn't want to be left behind and went too, but she uncovered the neck area and started kissing Giyu's neck. The two women were starting the action by taking control, throwing Giyu onto the bed and kissing him, each as mentioned before, in what part? Lemon skipped. Thus passed a night of pure passion, for when Giyu finished with Shinobu Kanae, she had recovered and asked for the second round, and when he finished with her, Shinobu followed him. After that intense honeymoon between the now three Tomiokas, more than 4 years had passed. Everything went normally, except that because they didn't measure themselves that night, the sisters ended up pregnant. Those babies were born and they were beautiful babies who were named Tsutako Tomioka, who was Kanae's, and another Gichi, who was Shinobu's. All of this stemmed from a betrayal by Kanae and Giyu's former partners. That pain led them to what was now a very kind and happy family. And let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.